Chapter 528. Shangguan Zhaorong was suddenly enlightened, but another question followed. Even if she had a special physique, why would he lie to her? What good would it do him to lie to me? Jiang Xiu said. It's the same everywhere. Haven't you seen the Jialan dynasty abducting girls? Some girls have physiques that are suitable to be used as cultivation furnaces. If I'm not wrong, you should be one of them. Before this matter broke out, Jiang Xiu had already made this judgment. Wu Zhangkui had used 10 life pills to exchange for a maid. On the surface, it seemed like he was infatuated with Shangguan Zhaorong's looks, but Jiang Xiu directly told him otherwise. What happened now proved his judgment right. Let's go. Bringing Jiang Xiu with him, he used an escape technique to leave. Jiang Xiu wasn't afraid of trouble, but if Shangguan Zhaorong was targeted, there would be trouble. He couldn't always keep her by his side, but if he allowed her to be snatched away and turned into a cultivation tool, he wouldn't sit idly by. Young master, does Zhaorong really have a special physique? Jiang Xiu nodded and said, that should be right, but don't mention this to anyone. Otherwise, I don't need to tell you what fate will be like. Shangguan Zhaorong's expression was a bit nervous, but she wasn't that afraid. She wasn't a flower in a greenhouse. Her family had suffered a sudden change when she was young, and she grew up in a palace where people's hearts were complicated. She had always been the target of men's competition and had seen life and death, so she could face this kind of environment. Humans were strange creatures. They could survive in very bad situations. For example, in a country at war, their doors could be broken down at any time, and they didn't even know when a grenade would be thrown in. However, they could also choose to commit suicide because they couldn't live in a very comfortable and happy environment. That night, Jiang Xiu left his residence once again and flew over the cliff, flying towards the distant mountains. He then circled around the peaks and went to the middle 3 peaks. He wanted to go into seclusion again. For many people with limited talent, it would take hundreds of years or even a lifetime to go from lower heavenly god to middle heavenly god. However, for Jiang Xiu, it wasn't a problem. He had all the conditions to break through, the only problem was time. Would he be able to complete his breakthrough in 1.5 months, and make it in time for the inner court battle? Jiang Xiu's god cultivation technique was the outline of all god cultivation techniques, and the beginning of everything. It could be said that it was the best god cultivation technique. It was recorded on the creation jade butterfly that was created by the heavens and earth. There definitely wouldn't be a freak who could create a god cultivation technique that was more awesome than the great god sealing art on the creation jade butterfly. However, there was still a long way to go before he could truly cultivate the great god sealing technique. As for the great god sealing technique, the most unique thing about it was that it could refine oneself into a creation divine weapon. Jiang Xiu had already achieved the fusion of himself with the saber pellet, which was the so-called fusion of man and saber. The man was the saber, and the saber was the man. However, this was only the first step in a long journey. In other words, Jiang Xiu had touched the threshold of the so-called heavenly saber law. Like other laws, many small laws contained in the heavenly saber had yet to be mastered, not even one. Jiang Xiu didn't know how many saber paths there were. Everyone in the Tianqing school was a sword cultivator. He was very unique. He was both a god cultivator and a saber cultivator, which was the opposite of the Tianqing school. Therefore, he didn't have a corresponding saber technique. It was no wonder that Lu Chongkong had asked him if he was really willing to go to the Tianqing school. They couldn't teach him, so he had to rely on his own comprehension. However, right now if he were to comprehend the saber Dao, it would obviously not be as fast as the ready-made heavenly fire law. He once again took out the flame. The flame was obviously much smaller than before. As Jiang Xiu comprehended the heavenly fire law, he absorbed the power of the flame inside. Naturally, the flame would become smaller and weaker. When Jiang Xiu absorbed all the heavenly fire law contained in it, the hellfire would disappear completely. He had already comprehended the heavenly fire law of speed. Next was the law of explosion. On the other hand, of course, he didn't give up on strengthening his soul. As his cultivation deepened, Jiang Xiu realized an indisputable fact. The soul of a god cultivator was generally stronger than that of an immortal cultivator. This advantage would become more obvious in the later stages. The bigger the godhead, the stronger the soul. At the thought of this, Jiang Xiu wished that he could have an immortal martial art that attacked the soul. If he could master it, it could really be regarded as a trump card. Jiang Xiu remembered that when he was advancing toward the great celestial immortal realm, he had already focused on the cultivation of the soul. If he didn't have a corresponding immortal martial art, he would have to work on medicinal pills and magic weapons. After taking some medicinal pills, there would be a layer of protective medicinal power on the surface of the soul. Some powerful magic weapons also had this effect. Of course, there were also magic weapons that could attack the soul. The Heavenly Execution Token, the keepsake of the Tianqing School's sect master, was a soul defense magic weapon. With that token, he could basically ignore most of the soul-related immortal martial arts. Jiang Xiu hoped very much that the talent he awakened when he evolved to the celestial immortal realm had something to do with the soul. A few days later, Jiang Xiu realized that the speed of his soul's strengthening had slowed down significantly. This was also something that Jiang Xiu had expected. The conversion rate of the soul-bending pill had decreased. This was not because Jiang Xiu's talent had decreased, but because Jiang Xiu's soul was getting more and more accustomed to the soul-bending pill. In other words, the body's resistance to the pill had increased, and the medicinal effect had weakened. At this time, the usual solution was to change to another type of medicinal pill. He could only change to the life recovery pill. In the Tianqing school, there was another high-level soul-nourishing medicinal pill called the 10 Souls and 9 Souls pill. Of course, Jiang Xiu knew how to refine that kind of medicinal pill. Its medicinal effect was even better than the soul-bending pill. However, the required materials were extremely difficult to obtain. It was not something that inner sect disciples could use. Only great celestial immortals were qualified to use it. Of course, some people were special cases such as Gu Qian. After all, he had a good father. He should have taken it before. After changing to the life recovery pill, Jiang Xiu's speed naturally slowed down. He put more effort into comprehending the laws. The breakthrough of a big realm required a strong soul as the foundation. For example, the ascension of an earth god to a celestial god was difficult. However, it was only an increase of a small realm. For example, the ascension of an inferior celestial god to a middle celestial god was not necessary. Comprehending the laws could not only increase one's strength, but it could also strengthen one's soul. It was no wonder that immortals looked down on gods. They felt that god cultivation was simpler and more violent. In addition, their bodies were naturally strong. It was no wonder that immortals sometimes felt that although gods liked to fight and could fight, some were simple-minded and well-developed. After trying the life pill a few times, Jiang Xiu decided to give up and use medicinal pills to nourish the life pill. He wanted to use this experience to strengthen his body. As one's cultivation level increased, one's body would become stronger. However, cultivating the art of god cultivation could also improve one's body. Therefore, he used the grand god sealing art to cultivate. However, to Jiang Xiu's disappointment, it was not true that one person could do two things. If the soul and the body were separated, one could cultivate the soul, and the other could cultivate the body. Both required the body at the same time. It was impossible for the body to circulate two cultivation methods at the same time. He could cultivate the great god sealing technique and comprehend the heavenly fire law at the same time. This time, Jiang Xiu had to make a choice again. If he reverted to his previous cultivation method, he would not be able to make it in time for the inner sect battle. Therefore, he gave up on comprehending the heavenly fire law and only cultivated the great god sealing technique. However, the results surprised Jiang Xiu. The speed of the evolution of the divine body was very shocking. This made Jiang Xiu change his cultivation method immediately. He used the evolution of the divine body to promote the advancement of the realm. The godhead and dharmic powers might be weaker, but the divine body was strong. The most important thing now was to make it in time for the inner sect battle. Jiang Xiu immediately used a day to refine medicinal pills to strengthen the body. There were more than 3,000 recipes for this kind of medicinal pill in the Tianqing school. Medicinal pills were different, and the human body was different. The same medicinal pill would be effective on him, but it might not be effective on others. unless it was a top-grade immortal pill. However, the resources needed to refine top-grade immortal pills were also top-grade. He did not have them at all. He used his superb alchemy skills to refine more than 10 types of medicinal pills. He tried them one by one. There was such a big difference even when he was an immortal, let alone when he had a divine body. After trying 10 types of medicinal pills, he was satisfied with the Wood King pill's effect. The conversion rate was 97%. It could be said that he had absorbed all of it. The absorption rate was also twice as fast as other medicinal pills. His overall cultivation speed had increased by more than 7 times. After taking 2 pills, the effect was reduced by 20%. 3 pills was the limit. Taking 4 pills was not as fast as taking 3 pills. While Jiang Xiu was cultivating in seclusion, the inner sect battle outside was nearing its end. Chapter 529. The inner sect battle was coming to an end, and it was also the most critical moment. 5 years of hard work depended on Jin Chao. The people below were fighting for the right to challenge the true disciples, while the people at the top were fighting for the first place. The first place in the inner sect sounded very impressive. The competition was very fierce, and the spectating disciples were very excited. They all cheered for the people they supported. At this moment, all the people who stayed were strong, and they were fighting to the death. Not far away, the person next to Gu Qian said, "It seems that the kid is going to go missing." Humph. Gu Qian snorted. Another person continued, "Don't tell me you really think that Brat dares to come up and compete, and can really stand in front of senior brother Gu. From the beginning, I didn't believe that Brat was just being stubborn. When the inner sect battle is over, we must catch the kid and teach him a lesson." He looked at Gu Qian and said, "Senior brother Gu, leave it to us. We'll do whatever you say." Gu Qian said, "I said I wanted one of his hands, but now I've changed my mind. One hand is not enough. I'll shatter his godhead, cut off his limbs, and throw him off Tianqing Mountain to feed the dogs." The people in the distance were all focused on the competition. Jiang Xiu hadn't shown up for a long time, and the inner sect battle was very fierce. He had long been forgotten. It's the last round. The first 2 will fight directly. Although there is a gap of more than 20 points between them, one has fought more, and the other has fought less. No one has lost, and the winner will be first. It has nothing to do with the points. Qin Qing also waited for a long time, but Jiang Xiu still didn't appear. The maid next to her asked, "Miss, who will win?" Qin Qing said, "Li Yiqing's sword cultivation is not weak, and his sword energy is very powerful. However, it's hard to say if he can beat Chen Yiming. They are both seeded inner sect disciples, and their strength is similar. It's not surprising who will win." She didn't say anything. They are young, and they should look at all the young talents in the spiritual state. They should not just look at our Tianqing school. They should look further and compete for the Azure Spirit list. The maid said, "Just them. Don't forget that the true disciples of our Tianqing school are the core. You haven't retired yet?" Qin Qing said helplessly, "Right now, a large number of our Tianqing school's disciples on the Azure Spirit leaderboard are about to pass their annual rings. After they retire, the people behind them won't be able to take over. The Azure Spirit leaderboard still needs their support." "Miss, didn't you say that only true disciples can compete for the Blue Spirit?" Qin Qing said, "If nothing goes wrong, these 2 will become true disciples this year. Then they will be able to play for Tianqing School." "Are these 2 people so strong?" Qin Qing then replied, "Their strength is above that of many core disciples. The reason why they didn't become core disciples was because the elders had discovered that these 2 had suppressed the inner sect disciples, and became the peerless duo. They had stimulated each other, and had a strong effect on their cultivation. However, if they were to widen the scope of their cultivation, they would have more targets to target. Without this stimulation, their cultivation speed would be greatly reduced." The maidservant was stunned. "These 2 are so powerful?" The maidservant who hadn't paid attention to the inner sanctum was very surprised. "These 2 have occupied the top 2 positions in the inner sect for 7 years. "Ah," the maidservant said, "no wonder. When I looked at them, I felt that they were very different from the other inner sect disciples. It turns out that they are so strong. The assessment battlefield was very tense. Many disciples were sent over to maintain order and tidy up the arena. Are you ready? Check the barrier again. I don't want to see any accidents. The maidservant exclaimed. We still have to set up a barrier? Is there a need to be so exaggerated? It seemed that even the battles between core disciples were not exaggerated to this extent. Indeed, a layer of spherical light that reflected sunlight could be vaguely seen shrouding the floating peak. It meant that when the battle started, none of the spells would be able to rush outside and hurt the audience. Li Yiqing grinned and said, Chen Yiming, this time, you won't be able to keep your first place. For 7 years, you have been the leader 7 times. But in the last time, which is also the most crucial time, you lost. Won't it be very painful? Chen Yiming's aura was even stronger. It's just the fusion of sword intents. There are many sword cultivators who have comprehended sword intents. Even if I use the secret technique of my hands, I can block them all. He didn't cultivate the way of the sword. He only relied on a pair of loose hands to defeat thousands of sword cultivators in the inner sect. Seeing the 2 core disciples in the arena fight each other, the audience at the side of the arena instantly became excited. Waves of cheers grew louder and louder. Not to mention them, even the exam elders were very excited. This was definitely a duel between core disciples. It might even become the most exciting duel between inner sect disciples. It was said that this duel had attracted the attention of several peak masters, and even the elders. Right now, they should be watching this duel from somewhere. Go and inform the exam elders. Chen Yiming's ancient demon loose hands is extremely powerful. Have them reinforce the barrier by another layer to ensure that nothing goes wrong. On a certain mountain peak, an outstanding man stood. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and he had a beautiful beard. Looking at him, one would think of a word in one's mind. Immortal. He matched all of a person's fantasies of immortals. Tianqing School's elder Xiaoya. Yes. On the side, a man dressed in white said, Elder, you only mentioned Chen Yiming and not Li Yiqing. Do you think Chen Yiming will win? Xiaoya stroked his beard and said, To tell you the truth, not long ago, I accidentally passed by Immortal Burial Mountain and heard that someone was practicing palm techniques. Every single palm strike contained the power to pierce through mountains and rivers, and the might of the scattered palm strikes was close to the gates of the heavenly Tao. A single palm strike could destroy a mountain, and the strength of that person's strength surprised me greatly. What surprised me even more was that there was a demonic dragon roaring. This child also has a special constitution and bloodline that is different from ordinary people. The man in white smiled faintly. That's unexpected. But then, a strange look flashed in his eyes. As an elder, Xiaoya had a respected status and was busy with many affairs every day. How could he be so free as to go to Immortal Burial Mountain? That was the place where the Tianqing School's disciples were buried. Of course, there were the spiritual tombs of their ancestors. For immortal cultivators, it was also a place of bad luck. If it wasn't necessary, they wouldn't go there. It was easy to understand why Chen Yiming went there to practice. Of course, he didn't want others to see him. But Xiaoya went there for no reason. Was he there to remember someone? It's about to start, right? This should be the last battle. The man in white said. Previously, the disciple who was bullied by Elder Gu was rumored to have outstanding talent. But in the end he became a coward and didn't fight a single battle. It seems that some people are oversensitive. Xiaoya looked at the field. The man's words had a hidden meaning. He asked, Who are some people? Don't tell me you're talking about this elder? I don't dare. The man in white bowed hurriedly and said, A while ago, there was a rumor that this person had outstanding talent and a strong and fierce personality. More importantly, his surname is Jiang, so he's a bit sensitive. Xiaoya said, He has a strong and fierce personality, but he's stubborn. He's famous, but he doesn't dare to fight in the inter-sect competition. After he finished speaking, he stopped. The field was about to start. The last battle, Li Yiqing against Chen Yiming. The moment the exam elder finished speaking, the cheers at the side of the field reached its peak. The sound of the cheers resounded through the sky and spread far and wide. But suddenly, The sound of a blade rang through the sky. Buzz, buzz, buzz. That sound was like a long blade whistling in front of them. It was so loud that it hurt their eardrums. The cheers were all suppressed. Some people even covered their ears in pain. Immediately after, a strong light shone down from the sky, as if it was from beyond the 9 heavens. Then, a blade light rushed out at high speed and slashed directly at the center of the stage. Who said that this is the last battle? The voice came from afar. The long blade chopped down on the hemispherical light membrane enchantment. With a loud bang, the light membrane enchantment shattered like glass. The long blade went through the enchantment and cut into the ground with a poochie sound. Hua! The field was in an uproar. This is a barrier that the exam elders specially set up as a precaution. It was destroyed so easily like tofu. Whoosh! When the blade arrived, the person followed closely behind. It's him. Gu Qian and his followers, Qin Qing and her servant, and everyone who knew him, exclaimed in surprise. Intersect Top 10, Chen Yiming Li Yiqing Xiao Yi Song Tianxiang, Yanbo Zhang Taixiong Lu Jian. All of you can come together. Don't waste my time. Chapter 530. Domineering, absolutely domineering. He directly shattered the barrier and even declared that he would challenge 10 people by himself. Looking at this arrogant man, the surrounding audience strangely quieted down. Only a few people were whispering to each other. Jiang Xiao. Gu Qian couldn't help but widen his eyes. He still came. At the last moment he still came. Miss, it's him. Qin Qing's maid cried out excitedly. Qin Qing was also stunned. She also thought that Jiang Xiao had given up. It was already the last battle, and everything was too late, but he still appeared. Jiang Xiao's gaze swept across the field. His eyes were proud and arrogant. He stood there like a king. Once he entered battle mode, his aura would constantly rise. This was cultivated from years of life and death battles. This was also the common trait of top experts. Why didn't you hear what I said? Chen Yiming Li Yiqing Xiao Yi, Song Tianxiang, Yanbo, Zhang Taixiong Lu Jian. Could it be that the 10 of you don't dare to fight with me? The surrounding people were in an uproar. Is he really going to challenge all 10 of the inner disciples? Who does he think he is? Someone laughed. He's too arrogant. Even a true disciple can't challenge all 10 of them. He's just looking for a beating. On the cliff of a distant mountain, Xiaoye and the linen-clothed man were shocked when they saw Jiang Xiao. First, it was because Jiang Xiao, a mere inner disciple, was able to break the barrier with one strike. It should be known that the barrier was enough to block the full power of the battle between Li Yiqing and Chen Yiming. The other reason was similar. He really is similar. The linen-clothed man was somewhat absent-minded. At that moment he seemed to have seen Jiang Luoxia, the majestic Jiang Luoxia who despised everything. No wonder those people were so nervous. Xiaoye's gaze was fixed on Jiang Xiao. He opened his mouth and said, "It was too sudden. This elder didn't notice how he broke the barrier. Did you see it clearly?" The linen-clothed man shook his head. "I didn't either. Just now, when they thought they were going to fight, they suddenly felt a saber intent. Then a shocking saber light slashed down. When the saber fell, they didn't even feel that it was from an inner disciple. They thought it was from a peak master or even an elder. His strength is not enough. There must be another reason. This kind of barrier could only be broken with strength by an upper celestial immortal. Breaking the barrier. The two on the cliff's expression once again. Because with their knowledge and ability, they might not be able to break the barrier, unless they had high attainments in array. Arrogant. Li Yiqing angrily rebuked. This was supposed to be a battle where he would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, however. This brat had stolen the limelight. Li Yiqing rolled the long sword in his hand and blasted it out with a thunderous force. Lose for me. Jiang Xiao rushed toward Li Yiqing, and a long saber appeared in his hand. A silver saber aura separated the airflow and slashed toward Li Yiqing. Ding! Two incomparably sharp sword will and saber domain clashed together. Li Yiqing was indeed worthy of being ranked second on the heroes' ranking list. When he clashed with the saber light, he felt that something was wrong. His sword will that could tear apart the void was actually suppressed by the saber will of his opponent. The saber force that filled the sky gushed forth like a vast ocean. Wang. The saber whistled. Silver light rushed to the sky and dyed the entire horizon a different color. Li Yiqing's handsome face was completely distorted. He was in pain. It was like he was crying from being crushed by a powerful force. The long sword in his hand seemed to be pressed down by 10,000 pounds. He drew half a circle with great difficulty. He wanted to form a sword art. However, the curse that was condensed in his hand dissipated little by little before it could form. Boom, boom, boom. The curse continued to shatter. It was like the sound of glass shattering. Boom. Li Yiqing could no longer hold it in. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Then his entire body flew out. The saber cheese momentum did not decrease. It twisted the air behind him until it was unable to bear the burden. You can't even withstand a single blow. Jiang Xiu smiled coldly at Li Yiqing, who was lying on the ground. He strode past him. The energy around him surged. The wind and clouds in the sky swept over. How? Gu Qian slowly stood up from his seat. The people around him were all stunned. One saber. He defeated the second in the inner sect with just one saber. They were speechless. Many people's eyes were about to pop out. At this moment, the aura that Jiang Xiu displayed was so strong that it was at the level of a middle sky god. He really made a breakthrough. Qin Qing covered her mouth in horror, and her beautiful eyes almost fell out of their sockets. This cultivation speed. It was monstrous. According to the Tianqing school's records, this speed was several times faster than the second in rank. Even the arrogant Jiang Luoxia was left far behind. He reached the level of a middle sky god in just over a month. Xiao Ye's face was also filled with shock. This elder remembers that when he first entered the sect, he was registered as an early-stage lower heavenly god. It has only been a short period of less than 4 months. The man in plain clothes was also stunned. The entire Tianqing school was shocked. Next, Jiang Xiu strode toward Chen Yiming. Chen Yiming was on guard. The man in front of him was like a demon or a god. His battle intent was monstrous. It was as if he wanted to crush and destroy everything. You think you can defeat me just because you defeated Li Yiqing? Naive. Roar. Chen Yiming bent his body, and a misty green halo spread out. A huge phantom of a demonic dragon rushed up to the sky from his back. He made a gesture with both of his hands, and it was very mysterious, causing the surrounding air to rotate. Ancient demon loose hands. Boom. He pressed his palm gently. It was said that in ancient times, there was a great demon who was once ranked as one of the top 3 emperors of immortal martial arts. He relied on a pair of mysterious and unfathomable hands, which were the so-called loose hands. He was known as the master of all fists. Later on, all the loose hands that the great demons cultivated were passed down from his hands. Everyone was used to calling this type of loose hands the ancient demon loose hands. The physical strength of the ancient demon was already unimaginably powerful. It could compete with the ancient gods and ancient shamans. In addition, it contained endless skills and mysterious loose hands. Its power was really unimaginable. The light on his palm kept flashing, and the strange scene swelled. Suddenly it expanded fiercely. With a gurgling sound, it suddenly grew to a size of several meters. It was pushed over with his movements. The elephant turned around. It was difficult to move. At first it was very slow. However, in the next moment, its speed increased. The constantly expanding palm flashed out. His palm was enough to destroy a mountain. Before the palm force arrived, the fist intent had already torn the rocky ground apart. As the giant palm flashed out, the clouds in the sky behind it had already been hit by a palm print. You're just a fake demon. How dare you embarrass yourself in front of a true god? Demons and gods were both different kinds of living beings. Jiang Xiu raised his right hand and did not even look at Chen Yiming. With a bang he sent out a palm. His palm was dazzling with golden light, and there were even red flames inside. It was also like an elephant turning around. At first, it was very slow, but once its speed increased, the giant palm fiercely collided with the giant palm that was charging at him. The 2 monstrous giant palms collided like 2 mountains. Boom. Jiang Xiu's giant palm was like a god descending, while Chen Yiming's giant palm was like a demon's claw, especially a dragon's claw. One could even see scales on it. To be able to cultivate the ancient demon loose hands to such a level, it was no wonder that Chen Yiming could occupy the #1 position in the inner sect for many years. However, when the indestructible beast's claw came into contact with the golden flame-like divine palm, the strong light from there penetrated the beast's claw. Then, the divine palm crushed the beast's claw bit by bit until it disappeared into nothingness. At this moment, it was as if time and space were being stretched infinitely. You're defeated. Boom. The divine palm only paused for a moment before completely destroying the beast's claw. Its momentum did not decrease in the slightest. Like a ray of light, it rushed into the distance. The mountaintop in the distance exploded with a bang, and rocks tumbled down. And Chen Yiming's entire person was swept away by the palm force. He felt that the surrounding air was like the light of fireworks. As his body leaned back, blood spurted out from his mouth. Can't even withstand a single blow. One palm, and only one move. The two in the inner sect actually could not withstand a single move from him. The surroundings were silent. A deathly silence. Jiang Xiu looked into the distance, pointed at Gu Qian, and said loudly, "Surnamed Gu, do you still remember my words? Wash your neck and wait for death." Chapter 531. Yes, Jiang Xiu didn't have enough points. He had only defeated 2 people in total, but who dared to say that he wasn't qualified? The 2 top elites of the inner sect couldn't even take a single move from him. Just now, he had said that he would fight against 10 people by himself. And everyone had sneered at him, mocking him for only being arrogant. But now no one doubted that he had this kind of ability. Strong, too strong. How could a disciple who had just entered the sect for less than half a year be so strong? He was really a monster. Looking at him, everyone's expression changed. They were incomparably shocked, including Xiaoya, who had already become a celestial king. At this moment, his heart also suffered a violent impact. He wasn't shocked by Jiang Xiu's strength, but by Jiang Xiu's natural talent. The strong would look down on the weak, but when this weak showed an unparalleled speed of growth, they would also be shocked, feel threatened, and even feel fear. Jiang Xiu's natural talent was admittedly shocking, but his personality was too challenging. He was never afraid, and this made everyone present feel even more afraid of this person. When gathered together, it was Jiang Xiu who was in front of them. He was different from the rest, as if he was going to break free from all shackles and shackles, an ambitious and ruthless person who was destined to rise. Gu Qian stood there, his face flushed red, and his lips twitching. That ant that he thought he could pinch as he pleased, that he would live if he wanted to live, and that he would die if he wanted to die, was now condescendingly issuing a death threat to him. Originally, it was he who was bullying Jiang Xiu, but now it was the other way around. Jiang Xiu wanted his life. How fierce was this counterattack? The surrounding people all cast strange gazes at him. There was mockery, doubt, gloating, and even sympathy. This made Gu Qian feel very uncomfortable. All the pores on his body opened, and goosebumps appeared all over his body. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. A few words jumped out of his mouth fiercely. "Jiang Xiu, you dare to provoke me, then don't blame me for killing you when the time comes." After all, he was a true disciple. Although Jiang Xiu had defeated 2 top inner sect disciples in a single move, he didn't lose face, and was definitely not afraid of his words either. However, he had been completely overwhelmed by Jiang Xiu in terms of momentum. "Jiang Xiu, even though you have won 2 rounds in a row, you don't have enough points. You don't have the qualifications to challenge a true disciple." At this moment, the exam elder said. According to the rules, only the top 200 inner disciples were qualified. Jiang Xiu had only won 2 matches in total, and had only accumulated 4 points. Jiang Xiu's expression didn't change. This was indeed the rule in Tianqing school. He glanced at everyone present. Xiao Yi, Song Tianxiang Yanbo, Zhang Taixiong Lu Jian, none of you dare to accept the challenge. What kind of joke was this? Even the strongest 2 of them had been insta-killed in a single move. Going up to look for a beating and leaving someone behind? I admit defeat. A man spoke up. This person was Xiao Yi. Whoosh. The crowd was once again in an uproar. He actually admitted defeat without even going up the stage. This was a rare occurrence in the inner sect battles. He didn't even have the courage to go up the stage. How embarrassing was that? I also admit defeat. I also admit defeat. Seeing the previously arrogant geniuses hanging their heads like defeated roosters, the exam elder couldn't do anything about it no matter how unwilling he was. We also admit defeat. In his previous life, there were 2 complete defeats and 8 people who admitted defeat. However, Jiang Xiu still didn't have enough points. He glanced at them one by one. Wherever he looked, they all lowered their heads. I admit defeat. I also admit defeat. No one in the entire inner sect dared to accept the challenge. The scene was very strange, but it cast Jiang Xiu's unparalleled prestige. Since then, Jiang Xiu was invincible in the inner sect. Miss, he really did it. Qingqing nodded. She didn't know why, but she was actually a little excited. He really did it. In just a little more than a month, he became a middle god. He suppressed the entire inner sect until they couldn't raise their heads. I really have nothing to say. Jiang Xiu said. Now how about it? His gaze looked straight at the law enforcement elder, who tried to make Jiang Xiu not have the right to challenge. 2 points per person. How many points do we have now? The law enforcement elder's face was ashen. This was not wishing you a happy birthday. This was admitting defeat and surrendering. As far as the eye could see, there were tens of thousands of points. 2 points per person. His points had already crushed everything. Why do you have nothing to say? The law enforcement elder said. You have the qualifications to challenge the successor disciple. Jiang Xiu's eyes swept towards Gu Qian in the distance, then turned and left. The successor disciple battle was different from the inner sect. It was a real fight for resources. Moreover, the core figures of the sect would also be present. This child is not ordinary. After Xiaoye waited for Jiang Xiu to leave, he spat out such an evaluation. What? The elder is tempted. Could it be that you want to take him as a disciple? The cloth-clothed man asked. However, he saw Xiaoye lightly shake his head. He smiled and said, That's true. Of all people to look like, you just have to look like him. Xiaoye said, Whoever holds him in their hands, he will be a hot potato. The cloth-clothed man said, That's right. Right now, everyone is so sensitive. Whoever takes him in, it's inevitable that the person in the seat will think too much. Even if that person doesn't think too much, the people around him will. What a pity. It's also his fate. The news had already spread like the wind throughout the Tianqing school. Before Jiang Xiu returned home, the news had already reached the ears of the servant girl, Wang Xinya. It was the servant next door who said it. He exaggerated Jiang Xiu to the skies. Wang Xinya's eyebrows danced as she heard Jiang Xiu's voice. She was extremely happy. Young master. Then what about them? Wang Xinya said. Sister Xiaorong and Xiaoyu went to Tianqing City to buy things. Brother Li accompanied them. This servant will make some tea for young master, and then go down the mountain to find them. During this time's seclusion, Jiang Xiu felt the power of the great god sealing technique. The cultivation speed of a god cultivator was actually faster than any other method. It was truly worthy of being the foundation of all god cultivators. The creation jade butterfly was ranked 11th among the 3,000 great Dao. This made him extremely happy. For the next step, he would change the direction of his cultivation and focus on developing his divine body. This path was the fastest way to improve his realm. If nothing unexpected happened, he would be able to rush to the peak of the upper sky god realm. When he reached the peak, his soul's strength and comprehension of the laws would be insufficient. However, he had to race against time. Not only did he want to shock the Tianqing school, he also wanted to shock the Azure Spirit list. He wanted the entire Immortal Martial Arts Academy to know that an even more monstrous genius had appeared in the Tianqing school. Only when one was monstrous enough and had a big enough reputation could one have greater influence and right to speak. Jiang Xiu had a feeling that since Lu Chongkong was already suspicious of him, the others would naturally be suspicious as well. At this time, the more he hid himself, the greater the suspicion would be. Only by being honest and unscrupulous could he reduce this suspicion. More importantly, He had to be more powerful and heaven-defying than the Jiang Luoxia of his previous life. He had to leave him far behind and shake off their understanding of the original Jiang Luoxia. Only then could he completely clear himself of suspicion. They could suspect that he was Jiang Luoxia, but once Jiang Xiu showed that he was stronger than Jiang Luoxia, what reason would they have to suspect? That would be a brand new powerhouse. The Ji Dao sect won't take long. Soon. Before he went into seclusion, Lu Chongkong told him a very important thing. Perhaps this was the main reason why the Ji Dao sect could collude with him to take the position of sect master. He had a marriage alliance with the Taihua sect. In other words, the Taihua sect's intervention had affected the Tianqing school's sect master. What kind of behavior was this? What was the difference between this and betraying one's country for glory? Thinking of this, Jiang Xiu forcefully crushed the teacup with a bang. This matter made him even angrier than the Ji Dao sect's plot to take away his position as sect master. A few days later, as the winning disciple of the Tianqing school, Jiang Xiu received a large number of resources as a reward. There were differences between divine cultivation and immortal cultivation, and the items required were also different. However, most of these items could still be used. It was just that Jiang Xiu didn't really care about them. After becoming a middle heavenly god, the difficulty of advancing had increased exponentially. The amount of resources he needed was even greater, and the resources were also even more precious. He needed to find a way to enter the 3 upper peaks. Most of his things were hidden in the 3 upper peaks, but once he entered the 3 upper peaks now, he would definitely be discovered. Therefore, he had to win the successor battle as soon as possible. Before the successor battle began, the Tianqing school welcomed a distinguished guest, and a large number of disciples lined the streets to welcome him. Chapter 532. There was news that a beautiful woman came. It didn't matter if she was a man or a woman. What was important was that she was from the Taihua faction, and came to watch the core battle. In the eyes of the higher-ups, the outer gate battle and the inner gate battle were just child's play. The core combat power of Tianqing school, and the true disciples were the ones who really decided the fate of Tianqing school. Jiang Xiu didn't count carefully, but there were more than 1,000 people. It didn't sound like a lot. After all, one enlightened master could dominate a region. More than 1,000 enlightened master disciples, who were still in the growth stage, gathered together. How powerful would they be? Dozens of true disciples of Tianqing school were enough to make the countries and dynasties of the spiritual state feel like they were facing a great enemy. No country would show their real weapons in front of the enemy. If someone leaked it, it would be considered betrayal. At that time, people from the Taihua faction could come to watch the core battle openly, and a large number of disciples even lined the streets to welcome them. This reminded Jiang Xiu of the 100 years when the earth lost its power and humiliated its country. In Jiang Xiu's courtyard, Shengguan Zhaorong was still listening to Wang Xinya's story. At that time, the young master arrived in time, and shattered the barrier with a heavenly blade. When the young master appeared, everyone was shocked. Wang Xinya was very excited, and the maid beside her was even more excited. Then, the young master said that he would fight 10 people. Of course, they didn't believe it. Li Yiqing, who ranked second in the internal battle, was not convinced and rushed up to fight with the young master. The young master raised his blade and slashed. She said it as if she was there in person, but in fact she heard it herself. However, not only did the 2 maids believe it, but they also didn't get tired of hearing it. Now the entire Tianqing school was discussing Jiang Xiu's talent. It was amazing. Ever since the inner court battle ended, Wu Zhangkue, who lived in the same area as Jiang Xiu, as well as the other disciples who had entered the Sky Motion sect with him, all stopped coming to visit Jiang Xiu. Firstly, Jiang Xiu was too high for them to reach. Secondly, Jiang Xiu was in the eye of the storm. If they were too close to Jiang Xiu, if Jiang Xiu lost in the true disciple battle, they would be implicated. Therefore, in the past few days, other than a few maids causing a ruckus, it was relatively quiet. In addition, it might be because the successor battle was approaching, or the entire sect knew that Jiang Xiu wanted to challenge him. Gu Qian did not secretly find people to deal with Jiang Xiu. The heavenly music outside was getting closer and closer. Those who could represent the Tai Hua sect to come here were definitely not small fries. Of course, they would travel in groups, as if they were foreign troops. Along the way, there were flowers and plants in full bloom, and red petals scattered all over the sky. In the room, Jiang Xiu stopped cultivating. Although he had been cultivating these days, he was worried that Gu Qian would find trouble with him, so he could not devote himself to it. In addition, he had been in seclusion for many times in a row, so his body and mind needed to be adjusted. Seeing the teacup on the long table with warm smoke, Shangguan Zhaorong took good care of him. He walked over, picked up the teacup and took a sip. His eyes turned cold. So it's her. Even though they were far apart, Jiang Xiu could still use a secret technique to see that it was a graceful fairy with a pearl crown on her head, wearing a golden robe, and wearing heavy makeup on her face. She looked very noble. Jiang Yan, the niece of the Tai Hua sect's leader. Although she sounded like a junior, in reality, she was older than the Tai Hua sect's leader. Jiang Xiu could not be compared to her in terms of age. Some people even said that she was over 10,000 years old. Hundreds of years ago, Jiang Xiu went to Tai Hua alone and dominated all the heroes of Tai Hua. She was one of them. Although many things had happened, Jiang Xiu still had a deep impression of her. This woman's cultivation was not low, and her methods were all top-notch. If I had known this would happen, I would have killed you back then. Jiang Xiu's eyes were filled with murderous intent. In that battle, on Tianhua Mountain, Jiang Xiu led Jiang Luoxia to become the fastest immortal king in the world. It could be said that he was very imposing. He went to cause a big scene and killed many disciples of Tai Hua sect. In the end, the Tai Hua sect's leader and the elders left with a big laugh, and the Tai Hua sect's dignity was swept to the ground. At that time, if Jiang Xiu had acted a little faster and stopped talking so much nonsense, he would have had enough time to get rid of Jiang Yan. Then, Jiang Yan wouldn't have come to the Heaven Motion sect so arrogantly today. It was like the saying, every dog has its day. It's such nice heavenly music. Sister Zhaorong, let's go and have a look. Okay. At this moment, Jiang Xiu pushed open the door and walked out. The sun was very bright outside. It was autumn, and the air was a little cooler and more bleak. Young master. She spat out a sentence that the maids had never heard before. Shang girls don't know the sorrow of their country's destruction, but they still sing the song of the backyard flowers across the river. Tianqing School's reputation was swept to the ground. In front of such a great humiliation, the maids were completely unaware. Where are we going? Shangguan Zhaorong was very clever. Although Jiang Xiu's face was expressionless and cold as usual, he had never asked the maids before. It was really surprising that he suddenly asked today. There's heavenly music coming from outside. I heard that the Tai Hua sect has a precious guest. We want to go and have a look. Young master, do you want to go with us? Yes, young master. Do you want to go with us? Young master, you've been cultivating at home all the time. You should relax occasionally. The three maids talked at once. Jiang Xiu's face turned cold. Don't you have anything else to do? What's so good about the people of the Tai Hua sect? Don't you know that the Tai Hua sect and the Tianqing school are both in the spiritual state? There can't be two tigers in one mountain, and the feud between the two sects has been going back tens of thousands of years. Of course, the maids didn't dare to act rashly. Shangguan Zhaorong said, but if that's the case, why did the people of the Tai Hua sect come to the Tianqing school to watch the successor battle? What do you think? Jiang Xiu's face turned even colder. Shangguan Zhaorong didn't understand, but she knew even more clearly that the young master was angry and didn't want them to watch. They could feel that the young master hated the people of the Tai Hua sect. Jiang Xiu also wanted to know why. Was it because the Ji Dao sect married a female disciple of the Tai Hua sect? Or was it because the Ji Dao sect asked the Tai Hua sect for help when they were fighting for the position of sect master? However, Jiang Xiu did not realize that a pair of eyes had been staring at them the entire time. He had seen everything clearly. Jiang Xiu was extremely confident in himself. He could sense any spying, but he had neglected the opponent he was facing. He had even forgotten that he was still very, very far away from his peak cultivation. We won't go. Young master, How about Zhao Rong make some pastries for your afternoon tea? Hearing this, Jiang Xiu's anger eased a little. At the top of the stairs of the Tianqing school, the sect master and many elders were there to welcome this guest from the Taihua sect. The arrival of this guest also indicated that the successor battle was about to start. Jiang Xiu didn't have much time to cultivate. Cousin. A woman wearing a snow-white gown, with a tail that was 3 to 4 meters long and fluttering in the wind, called out happily when she saw Jiang Yan. I'm sorry to let brother-in-law receive you here. After the woman went over and bowed, she said enthusiastically, Cousin, your presence brings light to my Tianqing school. How can we not welcome you? Besides, I haven't seen you for many years. I'm worried about you and can't wait to see you. Jiang Yan reached out and pinched the woman's nose. You're so talkative. Then her eyes fell on the tall man with a strong and domineering figure. Brother-in-law. Tianqing school was the most respected school in the spirit state, but she only called him brother-in-law. There was no family affection in the royal family. It was all about the rules. Even the emperor's uncle had to kneel when he saw the daughter of the empress. Jiang Yan was indeed rude this time. Many Tianqing school disciples couldn't stand it, but there was nothing they could do. After all, he was their brother-in-law. The sect master's family is happy and harmonious, yet you still dare to stand out and shout? The Heaven Motion sect doesn't have someone like Wei Zheng. Elder Jiang, you've worked hard. Jiang Yan said, Really? What a coincidence. On the way here, I passed by Tianqing City and heard that there was another super genius in your sect. He rushed from the early stage of the lower sky god realm to the early stage of the middle sky god realm in 4 months, and took first place in the inner gate. There is such a person, but there are many geniuses in Tianqing school who are more amazing than him. But how many of them can really grow from geniuses? Geniuses often end up in tragedy. Jiang Luoxia is a good example. Hearing this, Jiang Yan smiled. When will the real nuclear war begin? Since Elder Jiang is here, let's start tomorrow. Chapter 533. After dusk, while Jiang Xiu was enjoying the pastries that Shangguan Zhaorong had meticulously made, a person came. Before this, Jiang Xiu was sure that he didn't recognize him. Heavenly Immortal Jiang. What business do you have with me? The other party had a faint smile on his face as he looked Jiang Xiu up and down. Someone asked me to deliver a letter, asking you to meet them in Tianqing City. Ask me to meet them in Tianqing City? After Jiang Xiu came to Tianqing school, he seemed to act arrogantly and unscrupulously. But in reality, every step he took was part in his own plan, and every step he took was carefully planned. In his plan, it was still far from time to leave Tianqing school. Unless it was a mission from the sect, he had no plans to leave Tianqing school. Within the sect, he still had some protection. But once he left Tianqing school, the other party would have no qualms about making a move. After all, he wasn't Jiang Luoxia, who could go anywhere he wanted. Yes, please come as promised, Heavenly Immortal Jiang. Jiang Xiu asked. Who is the person who asked you to deliver the letter? The other party smiled and shook his head. I can't tell you. Heavenly Immortal, when you arrive at the appointed place, you will naturally see the other party. After saying this, he handed the letter in his hand to Jiang Xiu. Of course, Jiang Xiu took it first. As for whether he would go or not, he didn't promise. Since the letter has been delivered, I'll take my leave first. Zhaorong, see the guest out. After that person left, Jiang Xiu opened the letter and looked at it. There was a simple line of words written on it. Tianqing Crane Gazing Tower. The time was tomorrow at noon. The handwriting was beautiful, and from the font, it seemed to be written by a woman. In the immortal martial era, which was a bit like the ancient times on Earth, the authenticity of a letter could be determined by the handwriting. Therefore, Jiang Xiu could remember the handwriting of a few of his close friends and disciples, but none of these were his. Young master. Looking at the letter, Jiang Xiu couldn't help but think of all his friends in the past. Jiang Luoxia's friends were certainly not ordinary people, but with his self-esteem and his understanding of reality, he wouldn't ask those friends for help. If he was rejected, wouldn't that be unbearable? If he was stabbed in the back, that would be even more embarrassing. There were many people who would add flowers to a brocade, but there were very few who would provide timely help. Has the guest been sent away? Yes. Jiang Xiu looked up and asked, did that person go down the mountain? Yes. Shangguan Zhaorong paused for a moment before saying, young master. He seems to be the shopkeeper of Sky Travel City's Crane Gazing Tower. Zhaorong and Xiao Yu went to Crane Gazing Tower to play in the city before. It looks a bit similar. Jiang Xiu did not show the letter to Shangguan Zhaorong, nor did he mention that this person was related to Crane Gazing Tower. It seemed that Shangguan Zhaorong had really seen him at Crane Gazing Tower. He changed his mind. He wanted to go and take a look. Perhaps this was a trap set up by the Gu family, or even by someone else in Tianqing School. But it could also be that one of his old friends had the same suspicions, and was looking for him. Tomorrow, I'm going to take you to the city. Shangguan Zhaorong was very surprised. Young master, are you going to the city to relax? She was very surprised that a cultivation maniac like Jiang Xiu would want to go to the city to play. Jiang Xiu burned the letter. In Jiang Xiu's previous life, the reason why he was able to fight his way out of the Sky Motion sect and finally ascend to the throne of the sect lord was not only because of his talent, but also because of his strategy. He went very early, much earlier than the agreed time. Then he found a place to observe everything in the Crane Gazing Tower. On the streets, in the restaurants, no one could escape his eyes. But unfortunately, he didn't find anything unusual. However, he really did see the person who came to deliver the letter yesterday at Crane Gazing Tower. It wasn't until noon. Outside the door, a handsome young man walked in. No, it should be said that his skin was as white as snow, his eyes were like autumn water, his lips were red and his teeth were white. His posture was straight, and his chest muscles were well developed. He was very tall. Behind him followed a servant who was also dressed like a page boy. He walked up to the boss, touched the table, and asked, "Is he here yet?" The boss shook his head. The unbelievably beautiful young man said, "He won't not come, right?" "Boss, take me to the room I booked. I'll wait for you until noon." The boss respectfully took her to a private room upstairs. After the master and servant entered, the servant poured water for the master. But when she spoke, her voice was sweet. "Miss, that bastard is so timid. He doesn't even have the guts to come to the appointment." Humph. It turned out that this young master was a girl. She opened her mouth and said, "I'm sure he's a coward. There's nothing I can do about it. Out of the 10 or so good-for-nothings from the Heaven Motion sect, only Jiang Luoxia looked decent and died." Jiang Xiu secretly frowned when he heard this. How dare they slander Tianqing School and slander him like this? Of course. How can they compare with our Taihua faction? Everyone knows that the real #1 faction in the spiritual state is our Taihua faction. Tianqing School has long been out of business. The young lady seemed to like hearing this, and a smug look appeared on her face. It turned out that she was from the Taihua faction. She didn't know that Jiang Xiu had killed his way into their faction alone. He came and went as he pleased, and Taihua faction's prestige was swept to the ground. However, now, the Ji Daozong married a female disciple of the Taihua faction, and even let the Taihua faction watch the successor battle. The various factions of the spiritual state had probably long looked down on Tianqing School. What qualifications did Tianqing School have to compete with others for the #1 faction of the spiritual state? At the same time, Jiang Xiu also felt very strange. Why did these 2 female disciples of the Taihua faction, who were disguised as men, sneakily ask him to come here? He thought they were old friends. He was a little disappointed. However, I heard that this person not only has the same surname as Jiang Luoxia, but his talent is even above Jiang Luoxia. The faction wants the young lady to marry him, which is also a plan for the future. Jiang Xiu frowned when he heard this. His heart was filled with anger. "Old Jiang, how dare you have ideas about me, Jiang Luoxia?" It wasn't enough for their female disciple to marry the Ji Daozong, but they also wanted to marry him, a future genius. Truly shameless to the extreme. If there were no accidents, the Ji Daozong would probably agree to this matter. The marriage of the disciples had always been decided by the master. If the faction master spoke, there was no reason to refute. It was like the emperor of the imperial dynasty granting a marriage. Who would dare to disobey? If he, a future genius, married a female disciple of the Taihua faction, then the Tianqing school would be completely controlled by the Taihua faction. Old Jiang was really calculating. However, the faction master is too anxious. The Ji Daozong has only been the faction master for a few days. If there are no special circumstances, it will take at least 1,000 years, or even longer for him to fall like Jiang Luoxia. The young lady reprimanded. What do you know? The Tianqing school seems to be calm on the surface, but in fact, many people are willing to become a vassal of our Taihua faction. Many elders are not satisfied with the Ji Daozong. If their new genius becomes the son-in-law of our faction, it will be a great blow to their hearts of rebellion. This is called boiling a frog in warm water. The maid said, Young lady, you are so smart. You have seen through the faction master's thoughts, but why are you still unhappy? The young lady said, Of course I'm unhappy. I have never seen that person. If he looks ugly, then wouldn't I suffer a great loss? That's true. But young lady, if you marry him, will he care about our Taihua faction? You also said that many people in the Tianqing school are resistant to us. The young lady said, Show kindness. He is only a small middle sky god now. No matter how good his talent is, he still needs too many resources and help to grow into a true powerhouse. Many geniuses have fallen on the road. Our Taihua faction can help him. How can he not be grateful? Hearing this, Jiang Xiu was no longer interested in listening. He had already figured out the context of the matter. If nothing unexpected happened, after he appeared in the successor battle, Taihua faction's Jiang Yan would mention this matter, and the Ji Daozong would certainly agree. At that time, even if the elders present were unwilling, they would have no way to stop it. A good seedling would become a dish on someone else's plate. However, Lu Chongkong was suspicious, and the elders were suspicious, but wouldn't the Ji Daozong and his wife be suspicious? Things might not be as simple as they seemed on the surface. At this time, the Sky Motion sect's true disciples' battle had already begun. The sect had spent a lot of effort to prepare the rewards for the true disciples' battle, and they were very attractive. Even the elders and peak masters would be jealous when they saw them. After leaving the Crane Pavilion, Jiang Xiu returned home first. The first day of the successor battle would be drawing lots. The possibility of drawing lots on the first day was not high. He still wanted to improve his cultivation as much as possible before the battle, and he wanted to shock the faction once again. Chapter 534. Jiang Xiu didn't know what Gu Qian's cultivation was like. After all, he was a true disciple and the son of an elder. True disciples had countless secret techniques passed down by their master. Their father wouldn't hide his strength and strengthened their fighting skills and power. It was far from what outer disciples could compare to. They were completely different kinds of existences. At that time, Jiang Xiu had also expended a lot of energy to rush out from among the true disciples. He had killed many opponents along the way, and had almost reached the great celestial immortal realm, before he had completely rushed out. One had to know that at that time, Jiang Xiu had the help of his master and a group of senior and junior brothers. However, at that time, Jiang Xiu's reputation was already very well known. Many people had already seen that he would achieve great things in the future. Therefore, the resistance had become very strong and the strangulation was very strong. But the situation now was different. Not only did he have a fierce tiger in his heart, but he also had a sharp blade in his hand. Those sharp blades were the Great God Sealing technique and the Minor Fate technique. Although he was now alone, he firmly believed that the sharp blades in his hand would definitely be able to kill a bloody path. Anyone who had enough points had the qualifications to challenge a true disciple. This was the first stage of the true disciple battle. Jiang Xiu's lot was on the third day. They didn't have the right to draw lots themselves. It was all drawn by the elders. Although it was random, with the elders' ability, it was easy for them to draw a lot. It could be said that it was very early to arrange Jiang Xiu to be the third. If it progressed quickly, it would even be on the second day. This greatly exceeded Jiang Xiu's expectations. He felt that there was someone pushing him from behind. He had no choice but to surface as soon as possible. At the same time, it also didn't give him more opportunities to grow. The troublesome thing for Jiang Xiu was that he had almost exhausted the resources in his hands. Although he had won a lot of resources in the inner sect, they were used for immortal cultivation. There was no way to refine the resources for divine body evolution. Moreover, he was also very lacking in elixir formulas for divine body evolution. After he had advanced, the medicinal efficacy of the previous elixir had decreased immediately. It could also be seen that the divine body had changed greatly after the divine body evolution. He needed a higher level of god cultivation pills. He had once wanted to go to the third peak to retrieve the resources, but he knew that once this matter was discovered, even if there was no evidence to prove that he was Jiang Luoxia, it would still prove that he was related to Jiang Luoxia. Otherwise, how would he know where Jiang Luoxia hid his things? However, today, he had a legitimate opportunity to go up to the upper three peaks. When he arrived at the battleground of the upper three peaks, there were already people fighting on the stage, including Ji Daozong. Jiang Xiu's appearance didn't attract anyone's attention, but he knew in his heart that many people were secretly paying attention to him, and even staring at him. If he really dared to go and take the resources, he would definitely be exposed. In the stands, Ji Daozong, who was sitting on the sect master's throne, was awe-inspiring and incomparably domineering. One had to know that the throne, which was even nobler than the dragon throne, belonged to Jiang Xiu, but it had been stolen by a traitor. Jiang Xiu's eyes burst with anger, but he didn't look in that direction. Instead, it was the woman next to Ji Daozong and the guests next to her who looked at Jiang Xiu. The two of them spoke softly. Jiang Yan's face didn't show much of an expression. He does look somewhat similar, but not very similar. Plus, he's a divine cultivator, so the possibility is very small. Madame Ji said, "Little sister thinks so too, but many people in Tianqing school say that they look similar. After all, they are more familiar with him than we are." Jiang Yan said, "I'm afraid someone is doing it on purpose." Madame Ji smiled. Jiang Luoxia is already dead. If he really climbed out of his grave, he would be an immortal, not a god. The human heart is the most terrifying thing. I heard that little Yao went to find him. He didn't attend the banquet, which made little Yao very angry. Jiang Yan laughed. Everyone has a price, not to mention a brat who has just made his debut. If it weren't for those people who raised the price so high, perhaps a secret manual or a bottle of pills would be enough. And now, it's just more secret manuals, more pills, and a little girl from my Jiang family. The two sisters had no interest in the duel. A new disciple from the inner sect was still far from enough. They would only be interested if an extremely talented disciple appeared, one who could show them a great future. And this time Jiang Xiu appeared. "Brother-in-law, you're not angry, are you?" Madame Ji smiled faintly. "He's already married, so how can he not marry his disciple? How can there be such a good thing in the world? Even if he doesn't want to, he has to pinch his nose and bear with it." Jiang Yan sneaked a glance at Ji Daozong. The latter's expression was resolute, and his eyes were sharp. He seemed to be paying attention to the situation in the duel, but who knew what he was thinking? Moreover, he's in big trouble now. He offended Gu Duqian's son, causing the Gu family to lose face and desperately need help. Who can help him when he's on the brink of death? How can he not remember this kindness? Jiang Xiu's gaze fell on the duel arena. Under the barrier of light, the battle between the two was very intense. However, his gaze didn't linger. It passed through the front of the great hall, and he saw Gu Qian in the distance. And he also looked over, his eyes bursting with killing intent. The duel was finally about to begin. Gu Qian stealthily shifted his gaze away and started to chat with his fellow disciples. Gu Deqian wasn't really fond of accepting disciples, but he still accepted over 20 of them. These fellow disciples of his, standing beside Gu Qian, naturally appeared to be well trained. In addition, there was an immortal king seated in the elder seating area. When he shifted his gaze away, it was clear that he was extremely disdainful of Jiang Xiu. That's the brat. Yes. Gu Qian also showed respect to his father's disciples. These senior and junior brothers were not his followers. Each of them was an expert who could take charge of an area on their own. Especially the few older ones, who were already on the verge of breaking through to the celestial immortal realm. They had integrated countless great Daos, and their techniques were heaven-defying. They were on a completely different level. The combat power of immortal cultivators, especially those who had reached the celestial immortal realm, mainly depended on their understanding of the great Tao of the Golden Core. Just like the strength of a divine cultivator's godhead and how many nomological laws it contained, it was a comprehensive competition of strength, spells, secret techniques, incantations, and even formations and ritual implements. Compared to them, the disciples of the inner sect couldn't even be considered as beginners. These people were already kings in the eyes of many immortal cultivators from other sections. One could imagine their bearing and cultivation. Gu Qian naturally didn't dare to be presumptuous. Moreover, these people took great care of his master's precious son. The choice is up to him. If he survives, the first round will make him regret his past actions. The muscles on Gu Qian's face tightened. Looking at the rough man in front of him, he said, "Thank you, eldest senior brother." "What nonsense are you talking about? You are master's son." Gu Qian felt a burst of pride in his heart. Yes, anything could change, but the relationship between father and son and bloodline would never change. It was definitely not something that Jiang Xiu, who came from a humble background, could compare with. No matter how talented you were, you had to be alive to grow up. Wow. There was an uproar in the field. They saw Xiaoyi flying backward and being defeated. This was also expected. There weren't many inner sect disciples who could defeat a true disciple. It should be known that as a true disciple he had also fought his way out of the crowd, had better resources, and was taught by his master. He would usher in a burst of strength. All of a sudden he shot up again. After this round, the next one to go was Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu had already threatened to challenge Gu Qian when he was in the outer sect. No one believed that he would change his mind at the last minute. The second round had just begun, and there was a loud noise coming from the bottom of the mountain. It seemed to be quite noisy. Great aunt. Let me in. I think you've eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's guts." Two female companions dressed as men tried to barge in but were stopped by a disciple. "Your sect leader's wife is my great-aunt. If you dare to stop me, I'll let my great-aunt chop off your head." The disciple opposite her said coldly, "This is Tianqing School. It's not a place for a girl from the Taihua sect to behave atrociously." Jiang Yan said, "I think it's Xiao Yao." "It's her. This girl." Madame Ji smiled and ordered, "Let her in." Passed down the order of the sect leader's wife. "Let her in." The disciple outside the hall had no choice but to grit his teeth and say, "Yes." "Miss Xiao Yao, please, wait." Xiao Yao stopped in her tracks and looked at the disciple who was blocking her. She suddenly raised her hand and slapped him across the face. "This slap is to teach you a lesson. Open your dog eyes. I can do whatever I want in Tianqing School. You." Chapter 535. The disciple's face turned red, and he glared at the person opposite him as if he wanted to eat her up. This was a great humiliation. He would rather die than endure such humiliation. The people around, including the people in the hall, all saw this scene. Many people's faces changed, but the person who hit the disciple was the junior of the sect master's wife, who dared to stand up and teach him a lesson to protect the dignity of the Tianqing school. Several elders present suppressed their anger, and the veins on their foreheads were popping out. However, when they looked at Ji Daozong, they saw that he didn't have any intention of reprimanding the disciple, who dared to stand up and take responsibility. That would be a slap in the sect master's face. She was family with the sect master. "You what? Next time, open your dog eyes and see clearly. How dare you stop me?" The disciple guarding the hall trembled with anger. There was a true disciple battle inside and many secret techniques would be used. These were all secrets of the Tianqing school. His duty was to guard the hall and not let anyone break in. He stopped the little demon from the Taihua sect, because he was fulfilling his duty and protecting the dignity of the Tianqing school. After the little demon finished speaking, she walked past him. In her opinion, this was just a small character, an inconspicuous servant of her great-aunt's family. She hit him just like that. Could it be that he wanted to resist? However, after taking a few steps, She felt that the situation behind her was not right. The disciple guarding the hall lowered his head and trembled all over. However, he emitted a terrifying and dangerous aura. The little demon's heart skipped a beat, and he became even more furious. "Are you trying to rebel?" She turned around and saw that the disciple had pulled out his long sword. His eyes were not looking at the little demon, but at Ji Daozong, who was sitting on the high seat in the distance. However, why would the high and mighty Ji Daozong care about such a lowly disciple? It was a kind of kindness to look at him. He didn't know that he was doing this for the sake of the sect, and to protect the dignity of the sect master. Ji Daozong's indifference made the disciple's face turn completely pale. His eyes were filled with despair. The sword in his hand did not slash at the little demon, but cut his own throat. Puff! Blood spurted out from his cut throat, and hot blood sprayed all over the ground. At this moment, many people felt as if their hearts had been whipped. Many people almost lost control and stood up. Suicide. Committing suicide to prove his resolve and wash away his shame. But halfway through, he remembered that this silent but resolute protest was against the sect leader, and his disappointment in the sect. He could only return to his seat. The disciple fell into a pool of blood. Blood was constantly flowing out. A cultivator with a singing voice wouldn't die, but this disciple died because he didn't want to live anymore. The palace was very tall and spacious. Lying there, he looked very inconspicuous. However, it was as if there was no one else in the palace. There was only one person left. His death and his blood had finally protected the palace and the dignity of the Heaven Motion sect. The colors gradually became mottled and finally, it became pitch black. Jiang Xiu's eyes were incomparably cold. He looked deeply at that disciple. He didn't recognize him, but he would firmly remember his face, remember him. He would take revenge on both the Ji Dao sect and the Taihua sect. Idiot! The little demon cursed coldly. She treated his death with indifference, and even felt that it was incredibly stupid. She didn't even spare him another glance as she passed through the palace. When she saw her grand aunt off in the distance, an incomparably brilliant and beautiful smile appeared on her face. "Grand aunt, grandmaster." She came to the front of the palace and bowed. She was very polite and well-mannered, like a lady from a noble family. Come up quickly." Madame Ji was very happy and signaled for the junior to come up quickly. They seemed to be very close. Her face was full of smiles, and her eyes were full of love as she looked at the girl. "Why did you come here by yourself?" In fact, she already knew that this girl had come to Tianqing City. "I missed you," Madame Ji said. "You have such a sweet mouth, but I heard that it wasn't the case." She looked at Jiang Yan and smiled kindly. "You're here to see someone, right?" Jiang Yan laughed. "No manners, greet your grand aunt first." Little Demon looked at the Ji Dao sect and bowed. The latter smiled and said, "This is Little Demon. The Taihua sect is full of beauties. You're already so beautiful at such a young age. When you grow up, you'll definitely be as beautiful as Madam." Hee. Little Demon smiled proudly without any shyness. Looking at this happy family, the faces of the elders and disciples turned increasingly ashen. They were incomparably furious. However, this anger had to be firmly suppressed in their hearts. "Sit." "Thank you, Grand Aunt." Little Demon sat down next to Jiang Yan and glanced around. There were too many people here. Other than the elders and peak masters, many of the disciples standing were famous figures in the spiritual state. However, Little Demon didn't know that the so-called super genius was standing there, and asked in a low voice, "Who is that?" Jiang Yan teased, "Aren't you embarrassed?" Little Demon didn't look embarrassed at all. She looked around with her big eyes and said, "What's there to be embarrassed about? It's just a man. Since we're going to be Taoist partners, we should know what he looks like. If he looks ugly, I'll be disgusted." Jiang Yan shook her head helplessly as she looked into the distance. This matter had not been announced yet, and Xiaoyao had already rushed over. It was a little too much. However, she did not mind as it would not affect the outcome at all. "Then it's that." Little Demon followed her line of sight, and saw an extremely cold man who was like a god. The moment she saw Jiang Xiu, she felt very strange. This man seemed to be a little out of place with everything here. He was a lone figure. Her voice softened as she said, "Is it him?" Jiang Yan asked, "Are you satisfied?" Little Demon said, "So, no matter if I'm satisfied or not, I still have to agree. If I say I'm not satisfied, can I not be Taoist partners?" Jiang Yan said, "Little girl, just keep pretending. The smile on your face has already betrayed you. Not only is this person's talent outstanding, his demeanor is also the soul of many people. Even if he can't compare to Jiang Luoxia's demeanor, he's still at least one or two. He's already far from being comparable to the other disciples. However, you have to remember, you're marrying him because you want him to serve our Taihua sect." Little Demon said with a surprisingly serious expression. Little Demon understands. The sun was setting in the distance. It would be dusk soon. Jiang Xiu knew that it wouldn't be his turn today, so he turned around and left. "Why did he leave?" Jiang Yan said. "It's already dark. He's not in a good situation now. He offended the nobles of Tianqing School. If he's not careful, he might lose his life." "Is that so?" Little Demon raised her eyebrows and looked at Jiang Xiu's back. "What nobles? The Tianqing School is still under the control of the Ji Daoist sect." She dared to call the Ji Daoist sect by name behind his back. "How dare he touch our people? Now others don't know that he's going to be one of us." Little Demon's eyes lit up. "If I save him, will he be grateful to me?" Logically speaking, yes. Jiang Xiu gradually disappeared from sight. Little Demon asked, "Where does he live?" When Jiang Xiu returned to his residence, his expression was extremely cold. He was so grateful that Shangguan Jiarong didn't dare to greet him. She watched him enter his room and close the door tightly. A bunch of trash. He took a sip of spiritual tea, but he couldn't suppress his anger. He smashed the teacup on the ground. With a bang, it shattered into pieces. The dignified Tianqing School, known as the 13 Immortal Kings, actually let a girl run wild. A disciple innocently sacrificed his life, but they didn't even dare to fart. However, not long after Jiang Xiu arrived, a group of people arrived. It was a group of true disciples. Their momentum was completely different. Some rode on flying swords, and some used escape techniques. They turned into a sky full of Hua people, and landed in Jiang Xiu's courtyard. Seeing these people, Li Chang had goosebumps all over his body. There were more than 10 of them, and each of them was extremely strong. Who are you people? Get your master out here." Chapter 536. Seeing that these people had come with ill intentions, Li Chang, as a servant, could still hold his ground in the Jialan Empire with his cultivation base. However, when he came here, he felt that he was even inferior to a lowly guard. Facing these people, Li Chang felt fear from the bottom of his heart. My master is not receiving guests. Ha ha ha. One of the people on the other side laughed. Is this something he can decide? Today we are here. He has to see us even if he doesn't want to. As he spoke, he took a step forward. When his foot landed on the ground, the dust on the ground was squeezed away, revealing the bare ground. His entire aura surged and killing intent surged. Li Chang was only a lower celestial immortal. Facing an opponent of this level, he felt the pressure that seemed to be substantial. His breathing became difficult, and his brain was ringing. He frowned uncomfortably. "What? Are you planning to bully my servant to show off?" A voice came from inside the house. Then, Jiang Xiu had already come out of the house. In the blink of an eye, he went from the door to the field and stood in front of Li Chang. Following that, an equally powerful aura surged over. The two forces of nothingness and substance collided like two airflows. With a muffled sound, the two forces kept bursting out, forming a reverse airflow. "You are willing to come out?" Jiang Xiu glanced at these people. He had seen them in the palace. They were all Gu Diqian's disciples. They must have come to stand up for Gu Diqian. Just a bunch of useless people. Jiang Xiu knew very well what these people were doing here. The battle was going to start tomorrow. Other than threats, what else could they do? If they came to fight with Jiang Xiu first, the law enforcement hall of the Tianqing School was not to be trifled with. "Kid, you are really arrogant. Do you think that we really don't dare to touch you just because you have a little talent? Jiang Xiu sneered. Why don't you try to touch me? You openly interfered with the successor battle. Once it is found out, not to mention you, even your master will not be able to escape the law of the law enforcement hall. Jiang Xiu's words were cold and indifferent, but they carried an incomparable pressure. All of a sudden, these people's weaknesses were grasped. Tianqing School was very competitive. Even killing between disciples was not considered the heaviest crime. What the school could not accept the most was playing dirty tricks and using underhanded plots and machinations. You can defeat me and kill me fair and square, but you are not allowed to use underhanded means. That goes against the Tianqing School's law of survival of the fittest. This is not true strength. If such a situation occurred, the law of the law enforcement hall would not show any mercy. Brat, you are really naive. Forget about teaching you a lesson. Even if we kill you, so what? Do you think that the law enforcement hall will not give face to my master? The man in the lead spoke. He didn't look young, and his demeanor and tone were very steady, but the things he did were a little silly. You will never understand the authority and privilege of an elder. Jiang Xiu smiled coldly. Is that so? If they knew that the person standing in front of them was the former master, Jiang Luoxia, how would they feel? How would they interpret his words? The man opposite him didn't expect that in the face of such a large group of strong people, Jiang Xiu was not afraid at all, and his momentum was so strong. It seemed that it was a little difficult to threaten Jiang Xiu. Brat, you have guts. You're still so calm in front of death. I admire you a little. However, listen to me clearly. Tomorrow, you must lose to me. If you dare to play for real, us brothers will make sure you die without a complete corpse. Do you hear me clearly? Jiang Xiu said. Are you threatening me? He smiled. His square face was very stiff. When he smiled, it was a little scary. No, I am reminding you, kindly reminding you. If you are afraid, then it is a threat. Jiang Xiu said. Either you do it now or get out of here. Go back to where you came from. A terrible light burst out from his eyes, and the knife in his body rang out. He never didn't cower. You are courting death. They really didn't expect that Jiang Xiu was even more rampant than the rumors. It completely ignited the anger in their hearts. Even if they were to be punished by the law enforcement hall, they would kill Jiang Xiu. Kill him. Several disciples in the back rose into the air, and the sword in their hands flashed. Jiang Xiu's whole body suddenly burst out with a terrible knife intent. It was incomparably sharp, and the surrounding air surged, oppressing everything. A great battle was inevitable. You want to kill me? I will let you all die here. But at this time, a voice sounded out. You all have guts. You actually dare to fight here before the successor-disciple battle. Are all the disciples of Tianqing School so unruly and lawless? Following this voice, everyone saw a girl dressed in men's clothing walk over. Her chest was heavy, and the gems on her wide belt were shining. It was tied up high, and her chest was imposing. She was afraid that others wouldn't know that she was a girl. Her legs were very long, and when she walked, she swayed. At a glance, one could tell that she was a girl. But wearing men's clothing made her look even more handsome, forming her unique beauty. But this wasn't enough to intimidate Gu Deqian's group of disciples. More importantly, it was her face. It was the female disciple of Taihua sect called Little Yao. She walked over and looked at Jiang Xiu. You are really arrogant. Jiang Xiu hated her even more than Gu Qian. If it weren't for the fact that he had to hide his identity now, Jiang Xiu would definitely kill her. His eyes were cold, and he didn't even open his eyes to look at her. Little Yao was rebuffed, but she was also angry. She turned to look at Gu Deqian's disciples and said, This person is under my protection now. All of you, get out of here. You. Gu Deqian's disciples widened their eyes. Why? Are you not convinced? Then you can try to touch me and see what the consequences are. Gu Deqian's disciples, who had always bullied others, were now bullied by others. They didn't dare to offend the person in front of them. He dared to humiliate the Tianqing School in front of so many elders. After the humiliation, he was still fine. How could they dare to offend him? Perhaps even their master couldn't afford to offend him. Eldest senior brother, what should we do? Tomorrow was the day of the battle between Jiang Xiu and Gu Qian. There were still many opinions about how strong Jiang Xiu's cultivation was. During the inter-sect competition, he defeated his opponent with one move. No one knew how strong he was. If Gu Qian was really not his match and something really happened, they didn't dare to imagine. Therefore, they came in advance to take precautions. After all, it wasn't easy for their master to give birth to a son. Kid, don't think that this girl can protect you forever. Remember what I said to you. If young Master Gu can't win tomorrow, I will make sure you die without a complete corpse. I Weiziwu swear here. After he finished speaking, he glared at Jiang Xiu. Let's go. Jiang Xiu suddenly said. Wait. Those people stopped strangely. I will say it again. Let Gu Qian wash his neck and wait for death. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. The air was filled with the smell of blood. Gu Diqian's disciple left angrily. Little Demon looked at Jiang Xiu and felt that Jiang Xiu was really as arrogant as the rumors said. Hey, I just saved you. Shouldn't you invite me in for a cup of tea? Hey. Jiang Xiu had already turned around and left. Hey, I saved you. Jiang Xiu's indifferent voice sounded. No one asked you to save me, and I don't need you to save me. When his voice sounded, he had already entered the room and the door slowly closed. Little Demon was quite angry. She had never seen a man who dared to speak to her like this. It was really cold to the extreme. She had always had the temper of a young miss. She felt her anger rush to her head and used her hands to desperately slap herself. Otherwise, she really couldn't suppress her anger. You took my good intentions for ill intentions. If I didn't save you, you would have been chopped into pieces. Little Demon's servant girl said, Young miss, he doesn't know what's good for him. Do you want me to teach him a lesson? How are you going to teach him a lesson? A little demon said, Don't worry. He can't escape from the palm of my hand. Tomorrow is his duel with Gu Qian. He can be considered to have been involved in the Gu clan's troubles. Other than me, no one can help him. Sooner or later, he will have to kneel down and beg me. After speaking, she looked at one servant and 3 servant girls in Jiang Xiu's room. When she saw Shangguan Zhaorong, her eyes flashed with killing intent. It should be that Shangguan Zhaorong's appearance was too beautiful, causing her to be jealous. Chapter 537. The sun had set, and the sky after dusk was about to turn dark. The scenery of Tianqing Mountain was particularly moving. The first day of the successor-disciple battle in the palace was over. After the elders returned, they looked calm on the surface, but in fact, there was an uproar inside. Even though the elders could not express their opinions, the successor disciples below were completely furious. Most of the disciples of Tianqing school were carefully selected. They were arrogant and courageous. How could they bear such a great insult to their school? The whole night seemed to have become a restless night. A lonely figure appeared in the burial mountain of immortals, where the immortal remains of the ancestors of Tianqing school were buried. Most of the time, people's rejection of cemeteries was more emotional. When they came here, they inevitably felt a little sad. This figure was very bleak, and there was a kind of indescribable loneliness. Jiang Xiu also thought that since he was dead, there might be a tomb or even a skeleton in the burial mountain of Tianqing school, but he didn't dare to go there. The person in front of him walked to a tomb. With the help of the round moon that had just risen in the sky, he could see the inscription on the tombstone clearly. The tomb of Jiang Luoxia. He was silent in front of the tomb, not saying a word. The burial mountain of immortals was not quiet. There were night birds singing softly, but in the night, they were very clear, as if they were right next to one's ear. A timid person would definitely be scared out of his wits at this moment. But he just stood there like this. After a long time he said, Tianqing school's reputation has been ruined. It is no longer the Tianqing school of the past. I thought that Tianqing school would usher in its heyday for 1,000 years, but unexpectedly, everything turned out to be a dream, and took a sudden turn for the worse. How could you die like this? How could you die like this? It shouldn't be like this. How many years has it been since Tianqing School produced Jiang Luoxia? But he just slipped across the sky and disappeared into the distance like a meteor in the sky. His voice was filled with endless sorrow. I can't watch Tianqing School go on like this. It is a path of cowardice and destruction. Sect leader Jiang, forgive me for nagging. He made a decision, a crazy and bold decision. He walked up to the tombstone and reached out his hand to grab it. The huge tombstone was forcefully pulled up. He actually wanted to open the tomb. Someone who looks very much like you has appeared in the sect. Many people are suspecting you. I want to make this incident more real. So, I'll have to offend your corpse and make you disappear from this world temporarily. The immortal tomb was like a tortoise shell, and the tombstone was the entrance. After he forced it open, a hole appeared, and he dove in with a flash. Only the dim moonlight shone in, but with his eyesight, he could see everything clearly even without the light. There was a coffin inside, a coffin made of jade. Jiang Xiu's tomb wasn't extravagant. The immortal martial continent also advocated for lavish burials. No matter what happened when one was alive, once they died, they would bury as many treasures as they could. But Jiang Xiu, the dignified sect master, other than this coffin, there was nothing inside. From this, one could see the attitude of the Ji Dao sect towards Jiang Luoxia. Rumble. The coffin was pushed open. This coffin was only an ordinary jade coffin. According to legend, it could prevent immortal qi from leaking out and protect the corpse. Sorry for the offense. But suddenly his hand stopped. It was as if the air in the tomb had frozen. The moonlight shone in from the outside and shone on the bottom of the coffin, revealing a dark green color. But there was nothing inside. No corpse? His voice was trembling slightly. No, impossible. I personally buried it, how could it be gone? He was sure that this tomb hadn't been touched by anyone, because he was also the one who supervised its construction. Although he easily opened the tomb, that was because he knew the talismans on it. Every tomb of every place and every person would be added. The talismans were a special talisman placed by an immortal king, and other than himself, no one else could open it. If someone tried to open it first, he would naturally leave behind traces. Why is it gone? Under the dim light of the night, his body was trembling slightly. Someone stole the corpse? He felt that it was impossible. Who would steal a useless corpse? Moreover, it was the corpse of the former headmaster of Tianqing School. It was tantamount to going against the entire Tianqing School. If someone wanted to steal it, they would steal the funerary objects. But Jiang Luoxia didn't have any funerary objects. He came here to hide Jiang Luoxia's corpse. Now, the corpse was really gone. Although he was very surprised, shocked, and angry, of course he also had doubts. He needed time to think about it carefully. But the corpse was gone, so it was as he wished. Let's leave first. He slowly closed the coffin, and then left the tomb. Then he lowered the tombstone and drew a talisman. Finally, he carefully looked around the surrounding environment. After making sure that there was no one around, he disappeared into the darkness of the sky, and left the immortal's burial mountain. At this time, Jiang Xiu's family was having dinner. It should have been earlier, but because of the disturbance caused by those people, it was delayed. In addition, more importantly, Jiang Xiu stopped cultivating. Tomorrow was the day when Jiang Xiu and Gu Qian would fight. Gu Diqian's disciple also issued a death notice to Jiang Xiu. Li Chang and several servant girls were very worried. Shangguan Zhaorong walked in with a long table full of plates. She placed it in the seat that Jiang Xiu was used to sitting and shouted, "Young master, it's time for dinner." Seeing that Jiang Xiu was indifferent as usual, as if nothing had happened today, Shangguan Zhaorong hesitated for a while and asked, "Young master, will you challenge Gu Qian tomorrow?" Jiang Xiu's life and death were related to their life and death. Although this servant was not qualified to ask, she still couldn't help it. She didn't care about herself, but she cared more about the young master. "Of course," Shangguan Zhaorong said. "Isn't the young master worried? After all, that person was a true disciple and the son of an elder. His strength would definitely not be weak, and his methods would be richer than ordinary true disciples." Jiang Xiu smiled coldly and looked up at Shangguan Zhaorong. "The one who is worried is not me, but Gu Qian and Gu Qian's group. If they weren't worried, why would they come to cause trouble and threaten me? Shangguan Zhaorong suddenly felt enlightened. But does the young master have confidence? Jiang Xiu's eyes were a bit cold. If I want him dead, no one can live. When Shangguan Zhaorong went out, Li Chang and two servant girls surrounded her worriedly. Shangguan Zhaorong originally didn't want to say this, but for some reason, she was too nervous when facing the young master. She didn't say what she should have said. How is it? What did the young master say? Originally, she wanted to find out who the woman who helped today was. Even Gu Duqian's disciples were so afraid of her. If she really looked after them, then they would be safe. No, I didn't ask. In front of the young master, she could ask what she could ask, but she definitely couldn't ask what she couldn't ask. The early morning sun shone into Jiang Xiu's courtyard. The chirping of the birds in the mountains was very pleasant to the ears. It was very comfortable to listen to. Some people came outside. They were people who lived nearby. They all knew that today Jiang Xiu was going to challenge a true disciple. Young master. Shangguan Zhaorong woke up earlier than usual today. Breakfast. In the direction of the palace, people began to arrive one after another. Gu Duqian brought his son and a group of disciples. They walked over unhurriedly. The surrounding crowd was whispering softly. The old grudge between Jiang Xiu and Gu Qian was known throughout the sect. Everyone was waiting for this good show. Gu Duqian patted his son's shoulder, and then walked in the direction of his elder seat. With his hands behind his back, he looked like he was holding the pearl of wisdom. Don't worry, Jiang Xiu wouldn't dare to do anything to you even if he had 10 guts. Wei Ziwu comforted from the side. Gu Qian smiled. Senior brother, you're looking down on me too much. Would I be afraid of a new disciple? Of course you wouldn't be afraid. Sect leader. Greetings, sect leader. Ji Dao sect leader came. He brought his wife, Taihua sect's Jiang Yan, and her junior who forced a guardian disciple to death. The group of people had a relaxed expression on their faces as they walked towards the highest seat of the sect leader. Not long after, Lu Changkong, Xiaoya, and the other elders also arrived. The flow of people was very fast, and the main hall was soon filled. Everyone came, but Jiang Xiu still didn't show up. Xiao Yao said, "That guy is really arrogant. The sect leader is here, and he still doesn't dare to show up." "He's here," someone suddenly shouted. Chapter 538. Off in the distance, a beam of light shot out from the cliffs, fast and sharp. With a whoosh, it landed in the middle of the field. Of course, it was Jiang Xiu. He was used to everyone waiting for him. After all, he had been a genius for 3,000 years, and had been the paragon of the sect for hundreds of years. Furthermore, because of his childhood experiences, he was naturally cold and detached. However, his every move was elegant and magnanimous. "He's here." There was a sudden uproar. Now that he was here, the show was about to begin. The sect master and the elders were all looking at Jiang Xiu. They were looking at this disciple who stood out from the masses. After yesterday's incident, many people missed Jiang Luoxia. Although Jiang Luoxia had only been the sect master for hundreds of years, not even 1,000, Jiang Luoxia was a name card of the Tianqing school before he became the sect master. The Tianqing school had also given him a strong, domineering, and peerless impression. Everyone feared and respected him. But now, while many people were discussing and missing Jiang Luoxia, someone said that Jiang Luoxia was not dead. No one knew where this news came from, but it was indeed spread. This news reached Ji Daozong's ears overnight. No one knew when it started, but Jiang Luoxia's name had become a taboo in the Tianqing school. Many people thought that Jiang Luoxia had an old grudge with Ji Daozong. After Ji Daozong came to power, no one dared to mention Jiang Luoxia. But no one knew the truth, but Jiang Luoxia had indeed become a taboo. Now, because of his disciple's suicide, he had aroused public anger. They were still reminiscing about the era under Jiang Lu and ridiculing him. Given Ji Daozong's temper, he was bound to be furious. Therefore, many people first looked at the high and mighty sect master's expression this morning. Ji Daozong's face was relaxed, as if everything was under his control. Little Yao was very excited. "Grandaunt, who do you think will win?" Madame Ji smiled. I don't know. Your grandaunt has never seen them fight. Of course, Gu Qian had seen it, but Jiang Xiu had never seen it, so there was no way to measure it. Take a guess. Jiang Yan said. I think it will be Jiang Xiu. Oh, why? His words were overheard by an elder who was not far away. He felt that it was strange. Madame Ji and the little demon were also curious. Jiang Yan said. I feel that Gu Qian is Gu Deqian's son. His father is beside him, and there are so many seniors and juniors present, but he doesn't have any arrogance or confidence. On the other hand, Jiang Xiu's figure and bearing are all full of confidence, as if he is the best. Just based on this confidence, I think Jiang Xiu will win. In a battle between experts, unless the difference in strength was too great, the deciding factor would be one's inner self, confidence, and battle intent. That elder said. As an elder of the Taihua sect, Fairy Jiang has been through hundreds of battles and countless battles. Her eyesight is truly extraordinary. I believe in Fairy Jiang's eyesight, but we still need to see the specific situation. This battle seemed fair on the surface, but in reality, it was bound to be affected by outside factors. Gu Deqian looked very relaxed. Kid, today, I want you to die on the stage. Gu Qian's eyes were filled with killing intent. He was pushed to the corner by a small new disciple. These days he had become a joke, and even his father's lineage was looked down upon. Clang. Unsheathing his sword, Gu Qian attacked first. The sharp sword flashed, and with a blood-red blade light, it split the void and flashed towards Jiang Xiu. It's the ancient immortal sword, blood-soul separation sword. Many people were shocked. This was the second immortal sword of the sect, and it belonged to Gu Deqian. He actually lent it to his son. What's the point of playing? The true disciples were all in an uproar. If Gu Qian also fought with them with this sword, they would have no chance of winning. Tianqing school was a big swordsman sect. Of course, there was a top immortal sword in the sect. Although it was not on the sword list, it was definitely a first-class immortal sword. This immortal sword was sharp and powerful, and it was said that it had a very evil power that could affect one's soul, and even hurt it. Whoosh! Jiang Xiu's eyes flashed. He immediately waved his hand, and a bright flash of light flashed from his palm and rushed towards the sword light. No one could imagine how fast Jiang Xiu's attack was at this moment. With a clang, the two rays of light shattered and exploded. He blocked it. Someone exclaimed, "Take 10 more of my moves." Gu Qian held the heavenly weapon in his hand, and his expression became wild. The heavenly weapon in his hand was like an unbridled wild horse, wildly slashing out without any scruples. For a moment, the sword whistled and the sword light flashed, wreaking havoc, and enveloping Jiang Xiu. Clang, clang, clang. In an instant, the whole field was filled with bright sword qi and saber light, constantly colliding and bursting. The figures had been completely covered, and the naked eye could not see them. This is the sky robbery. Both of them are using the heavenly tribulation. The surrounding disciples were in an uproar. With a whoosh, Xiaoye, who was on the stage, stood up uncontrollably. He cried out involuntarily. How could he know the heavenly tribulation? Only the inner disciples know the heavenly tribulation. At this moment, some recent rumors flashed in the minds of many people. Some people said that Jiang Xiu might be Jiang Luoxia. This escape skill was one of the 9 secret skills of Tianqing school. Its specialty was that in a high-speed fight, it could dodge the sword techniques and constantly flash in a small area at high speed. When it reached the peak, it could dodge up to 10,000 times in an instant. No matter how dense the sword techniques were, it could dodge them. How could an inner disciple without a master learn the escape skill of the sky robbery, which only true disciples could practice? The other elders all changed their expressions. They could not help but think more. Madame Ji and Jiang Yan also looked at Ji Daozong in shock. The latter looked calm, but his eyes were fiercely looking at Lu Chongkong, and he smiled lightly. "Daozong," Madame Ji called out softly. Ji Daozong said in a voice that only they could hear, "I witnessed Jiang Luoxia's death with my own eyes. There is no way he could come back from the dead. Moreover, even if he is Jiang Luoxia, he would not be stupid enough to expose his identity. Since this person appeared, someone has been instigating that he is Jiang Luoxia. Whether he is Jiang Luoxia or not, as long as the news spreads, some people will achieve their goal. Ghosts are not scary. What is scary is the person who pretends to be a ghost. Someone wants to dig out what happened back then. Madame Ji pondered. The couple had a tacit understanding. Although they were talking and listening to each other, their eyes never left the field from beginning to end, as if they were wholeheartedly enjoying the battle. Jiang Xiu, give me your life. Gu Qian roared, and two shadows flashed. The saber light and the sword qi intertwined, contending with each other. In an instant, the stone platform under their feet was completely destroyed. It was cut into pieces. What was even more shocking was that even the boundary outside was covered with cracks. It looked like it was about to shatter. This was the boundary for the true disciples' battle, set up by the real law enforcement elders and several immortal kings. Dumbfounded. The blood-soul separation sword was too amazing. Under the support of such an immortal sword, Jiang Xiu's cultivation once again shocked everyone. His figure flashed faster than the previous, and his saber was faster than the previous one. It was incomparably fierce. In the blink of an eye, the sword qi burst forth, and the saber intent swept over. He hasn't lost yet. Wei Ziwu, as well as Gu Deqian's disciples, were all extremely shocked. Their junior brother was wielding their master's sword. Even if he could not unleash the full power of his cultivation, he should have been able to kill Jiang Xiu in an instant. I wonder who will have the last laugh. All of a sudden, the blood-red sword soared into the sky, and rings of powerful shock waves spread out. Above the sky, dark clouds gathered, forming a vortex that covered dozens of miles. It was pitch black inside, but there were occasional flashes of lightning, filling the air with waves of light that made people dizzy. Blood-soul destruction. Gu Qian raised the sword above his head and suddenly slashed down. Ah! The vortex in the sky like a black hole suddenly pressed down. It was incomparably fierce, and the sound of the sword filled heaven and earth. When it pressed down, the terrible pressure seemed to directly crush one's brain. Many people held their heads in pain and screamed in pain. Oh my God! Soul attack! Many people cried out in panic. Even Jiang Yan and Xiao Yao on the stage changed their expressions. It actually triggered the ancient imprisonment on the immortal sword. Chapter 539. Crack. The sword light flashed like a bolt of lightning that tore through the sky. It disappeared in a flash, heading toward Jiang Xiu's head. Many people on the sidelines stood up. The reason why this blood and soul separation sword was ranked second in the Tianqing school was that there was a soul attack on it. The soul of an ordinary human celestial immortal would not be able to withstand this sword, except for the soul of a great perfection immortal king who was slightly stronger. Although the soul attack was not strong, any attack was enough to kill a defenseless soul. Whoosh! Jiang Xiu's face suddenly changed. He knew that there was a soul attack on this sword, but he did not think that Gu Deqian would teach it to his son. How cautious was Gu Deqian to think that his son, who was holding an ancient immortal sword passed down by his ancestors, would not be a match for him. Jiang Xiu. Dodge. Someone on the sidelines shouted anxiously. But as for soul attacks, there was no way for Jiang Xiu to know where they would attack or what the attack method would be. How was Jiang Xiu supposed to dodge them? According to Jiang Xiu's understanding, soul attacks transcended all forms of thought. They were intangible and mysterious. Whoosh! At this moment, Jiang Xiu felt his mind go blank, as if a white light had pierced through his brain. Is he dead? At this moment, the surroundings became silent. Damn it! Many successor disciples were extremely angry. The successor battle was set up for the disciples of the sect to learn from each other and improve their cultivation. There was no skill to speak of. Anyone, even an ordinary person, who held the blood and soul separation sword and triggered the restriction on it, could kill anyone below the great perfection immortal king. This blood and soul separation sword is used to guard the sect, not for him to use to solve his personal grudges. The elders also frowned. They were shocked and furious. It would be a pity for such a genius to die. Moreover, he died in such a way that went against the rules. It was really unfair. If it wasn't for the fact that this sword was a soul attack, They would have even stepped in to save Jiang Xiu. How dare you? At this moment, Jiang Xiu suddenly roared and instinctively uttered the first incantation of the world. Hong! At this moment, the entire world was filled with the sound of the first sound of heaven and earth, as if it had come from ancient times. Immediately after, a strong light burst out from his forehead as the world laws descended, forming another world that enveloped this world. The laws of the world were not something that could be compared to the influence formed by the sword intent, or the domain formed by the influence. It was a world that contained time and space. In Jiang Xiu's world, everything was decided by him. What is this? Could it be? The expressions of Jiang Yan and the elders of the Ji Dao sect changed once more. They had never imagined that the monstrous Jiang Xiu would actually have such a trump card. He's actually mastered the laws of time and the laws of space. Furthermore, he's even fused them together to form the laws of worlds. Oh my God! Even the gloomy Gu Diqian's expression changed, and his eyes widened in disbelief. Within the laws of worlds, many immortal techniques and spells would be greatly weakened, and some would even lose their original power. They were very heaven-defying laws, and very few people could master them. Unfortunately, soul attacks were still effective. Perhaps the laws of worlds would be weakened in Jiang Xiu's world laws, but as long as it was a soul attack, with the current strength of Jiang Xiu's soul, any soul attack with offensive power would be enough to destroy him. What a pity! Those who could master the law of chains were second only to soul mutators. Jiang Xiu's potential was truly limitless. Looking at him was like looking at another Jiang Luoxia. It was truly a pity that such a genius had fallen because of this. Ah! He screamed madly as if he had gone mad. His long hair howled in anger, and his face twisted in pain. This kind of pain was far more painful than taking the soul-tempering pill. His godhood crackled, and cracks began to appear. Gods were different from immortals. Gods condensed their godhood and fused it with their soul. Although it didn't have much defensive power, even if it was just a layer of membrane, the godhood would be destroyed first, and then the soul. Ah! Jiang Xiu's eyes flowed with blood. In the next moment, Jiang Xiu's screams suddenly stopped. He stood there without moving, but his eyes had already turned scarlet red, and were filled with blood. Dead. Little Yao said. He died just like that. He's actually a short-lived ghost. Ha ha ha. Gu Qian raised the blood-soul separation sword and laughed loudly. His laughter was incomparably carefree, as if he had gone mad. These past few months, the resentment in his heart had finally been vented. Dead. An ant dares to make this young master an enemy. Ha ha ha. This is your fate. The disciples of the Gu clan were also very excited. They didn't expect that their master would actually lend their junior brother an immortal sword. Wei Ziwu said, Good kill. Lu Changkong let out a long sigh. Not far away, Xiaoye lowered his head, and the various elders all had different expressions. This round Gu Qian wins. Little Yao suddenly said, Strange, since he's dead, why is he still floating in midair? That's right. Everyone saw Jiang Xiu standing there without moving, but they didn't see that Jiang Xiu's feet were actually 3 to 4 centimeters off the ground. In other words, he was floating in midair. Many people would feel more comfortable hovering in the air due to their enthusiasm in battle, and they would be able to use their escape techniques faster. But how could a dead person still float in midair? What's going on? Logically speaking, Jiang Xiu should have fallen to the ground after winning. How could he keep floating? Could it be that he's not dead? No, he's definitely dead. They still couldn't feel any aura from Jiang Xiu's body. Not to mention the surrounding people. Even Ji Daozong, who was sitting there, had a thoughtful expression. Madam Ji said, Daozong, what's going on? Ji Daozong said, to be able to float in midair, there should be a mysterious force supporting him. Mysterious force? What is that? Ji Daozong shook his head. I'm not sure, it's hard to say. There are too many things that can't be explained. Maybe it's related to his Protoss bloodline. Everything is hard to say. Then he's dead? He's dead. Ji Daozong was very certain. Since the sect leader said that he was dead, no one doubted it anymore. Law enforcement elder said, Then the winner of this round is Gu Qian. I object. A disciple shouted. I object too. Gu Qian borrowed the sect's sect-protecting immortal sword to kill Jiang Xiao. This isn't fair. If he had that sword, who would be able to beat him? He would be invincible under the great immortal realm. Then what's the point of fighting the successor battle? Just give him first place and give him all the resources. Right. The disciples were all filled with righteous indignation. They were very dissatisfied with this. This kind of situation had never happened before. No elder would give their sect-protecting immortal weapons to the disciples to fight. Gu Deqian stood up and said, but there's no rule that forbids the use of powerful immortal weapons. Xiaoye said, indeed there's no rule. However, such a powerful immortal weapon that would cause the disciples to lose balance should not appear in the successor battle. Otherwise, the successor battle would lose its meaning. Gu Deqian said, a win is a win, a loss is a loss. Your future opponent might also have a heaven-defying immortal weapon. Could it be that you want your opponent to put down his immortal weapon? What a joke. There was indeed such a possibility. However, this possibility was close to zero. This level of immortal weapon was admittedly a sharp weapon that would cause one's expression to change. However, at the same time, it was also a treasure that everyone would want. They would definitely not give such a treasure to a low-level disciple. If it was lost, it would be a great loss to the sect. Xiaoye said, then Elder Gu means that there's no need to fight this successor battle? It's not like Gu Qian will use the immortal sword in every situation. The disciples present all looked towards the law enforcement elders. There had to be a conclusion to this matter. Otherwise, it would greatly affect the morale of the disciples. Sect leader, please give your orders. The sect leader said, the immortal sword is indeed unbalanced. However, it is true that Gu Qian killed Jiang Xiao. Gu Qian will naturally win this round. After he finished speaking, the disciples below all fell silent. However, they were not convinced in their hearts. How was this a competition of strength? It was clearly a competition of fathers. Chapter 540. As the sect master of the Ji Dao sect, his words carried enormous weight. Whoever he said would win. Who would dare to be unconvinced when the sect master moved his golden mouth away? However, a hellish voice rang out. Who said he won? Hearing this voice, everyone was startled. They all stared at the floating corpse in disbelief. The voice came from the dead Jiang Xiao, but it was very obedient, as if it came from far away. However, after the corpse finished speaking, it didn't move at all. It didn't even have a trace of aura. It felt as if the corpse was speaking, cold and strange. Is that Jiang Xiao speaking? Everyone felt strange. Everyone present was an expert. Even the sect master said that Jiang Xiao was dead. How could a dead person speak? Is he not dead? This was everyone's next reaction. He's still alive? Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, the floating corpse slowly rose up with its head hanging down. The bizarre scene caused some people to cry out in alarm. No, impossible. Gu Deqian and Gu Qian's expressions completely changed. This matter was too strange. After being hit by a soul attack, the person's soul would naturally die. How could he still be alive? Especially in such a strange way. Why is it impossible? Jiang Xiao's voice rang out again. This time, everyone was absolutely certain that it was him. He was the one speaking, pretending to be mysterious. Gu Qian's face turned green as he roared furiously. The blood-soul separation sword in his hand ruthlessly slashed at Jiang Xiao again. His snow-white mind seemed to be pierced by a white light. Whoosh! Whoosh! At this moment, Jiang Xiao's body emitted a very dim luster. It was the Destiny Divine Dao Divine Light that contained the Lesser Destiny Art. He had never used the Lesser Destiny Art before, so he could only vaguely comprehend some things that would happen. The Greater Destiny Art could control all fates, while the Lesser Destiny Art could change one's own fate. In that moment of life and death, Jiang Xiao had comprehended the Lesser Fate Art's ability to change his fate. He immediately used the Lesser Fate Art to prevent himself from dying at Gu Qian's hands. It had to be said that he had succeeded. To be more precise, he had only succeeded halfway. He had indeed not died under Gu Qian's ancient immortal sword, but his soul had been extinguished. However, his consciousness was still attached to the divine Tao of destiny. Jiang Xiu waited for a long time. Yes, he felt like it had been a century. It was as if he had crawled out of a 1,000-year-old tomb. After waiting for a long time without any results, Jiang Xiu felt a chill in his heart. Could it be that the person survived, but the soul was gone? Could a person really live without a soul? As time passed, he gradually despaired. In the end, he might really be alive, but his soul was gone. Thinking about it carefully, it was fine if the soul was gone. The reason why everyone had to cultivate their soul in the later stages was because the destructive power of soul attacks was too strong. They had no choice but to improve it. Everyone else had the ability to use soul attacks, but if you didn't, you would be at a disadvantage. However, without a soul, you naturally couldn't attack others, and similarly, others couldn't attack you. Moreover, when cultivating in the future, there would be no restrictions on the soul when crossing major realms. It might be easier to break through. Die for me. Gu Qian crazily attacked Jiang Xiu with his sword again and again. However, Jiang Xiu felt like he had an indestructible body. He allowed Gu Qian to attack him, but it didn't affect him at all. Boom. Jiang Xiu's body suddenly erupted with an incomparably strong beam of light. The beam of light soared straight into the sky. It was like a rocket that reached the 9 heavens. The energy that erupted from the beam of light was unceasingly pushed to the side. The barrier of the arena was like a thin film. It was instantly destroyed without any resistance. The people on the sidelines stood up even more uncontrollably. They didn't understand, but they felt that it was awesome. Grandaunt, what's going on? Madame Ji was also confused. She had never seen such a strange thing. A person who was already dead could speak, but how could he attract the power of heaven and earth? It seems like the laws are descending. Jiang Xiu couldn't wait for his soul to recover, but the godhead shattered along with his soul. His soul couldn't recover, so he tried to condense the godhead again. As a result, the current situation happened. The commotion seemed exaggerated. The laws of heaven and earth quickly began to condense into a godhead. It wasn't attached to the soul, but an independent godhead. Jiang Xiu had never seen a godhead so directly. It was like the universe. The laws of heaven and earth that he had obtained before were descending one after another. Jiang Xiu knew that this was a rare opportunity. He hadn't been able to comprehend the hellfire for a long time, and it was difficult for the heavenly fire law to advance. This was an excellent opportunity. Unfortunately, Feng Tushui didn't manage to find the resources. Otherwise, the opportunity would have been there, and the 6 gods would have been able to work together to acquire the god sealing art. Kill him, Gu Diqian roared. The situation seemed to have gone out of control. The pillars of light kept exploding, and the hurricane swept up made people unable to open their eyes. Years of fighting made Gu Diqian feel danger. In the field, Jiang Xiu's aura was constantly rising. Kill. Gu Qian's eyes were piercing red. He madly slashed at Jiang Xiu with his sword. No matter how sharp the sword light was, when it hit Jiang Xiu's body, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. It couldn't raise the slightest wave. Jiang Xiu's aura was still rising crazily. His eyes, which were bleeding with blood, were shining with a strong light. Not long after, Jiang Xiu's aura returned to the early stage of the mid-heavenly god realm. However, there were no signs of it stopping. Mid-heavenly god realm. Late heavenly god realm. What's going on? Why is he constantly breaking through? Heavens! One small realm in a second. Everyone was dumbfounded. Every small realm that fell on their heads would take a few dozen jin or 100 years. Some would even take a few 100 years. Was there any justice? Peak mid-heavenly god realm. He broke through 3 small realms in a single breath. Lu Changkong was already stunned when he saw Jiang Xiu break through a realm at Jialan. One could imagine how amazing it was to see Jiang Xiu break through 3 small realms in a row. Boom. Upper heavenly god realm. At this moment, even sect master Ji Daozong and Jiang Yan were stunned. These 2 were first-class experts. Their talent was also amazing. Their cultivation speed was also flying in the eyes of others. However, compared to Jiang Xiu, Their thousands of years of cultivation were all wasted. It can't be. Xiao Yao was also stunned. This kind of breakthrough speed was obviously the rhythm of eating chicken tonight. It was unheard of. It finally stopped. After breaking through to the upper heavenly god realm, he finally stopped. The karmic fire that Jiang Xiu refined completely disappeared. The heavenly fire laws that it contained were all absorbed by him. Using the opportunity of condensing a new godhead, he deceived everyone. Originally, if one wanted to break through to the upper heavenly god realm, they would definitely be hindered by the soul. They would have to strengthen their soul first. However, now that even their soul was gone, this problem no longer existed. Very heaven-defying, he directly broke through to the upper heavenly god realm. Who said that he won? Want to win against me? He's still far from it. Boom. Boom. Upper heavenly god against upper heavenly god. What was this? It was a complete suppression. Jiang Xiu soared into the sky. Raising his hands high, he fiercely chopped down with his long blade. The blade light flashed and became several hundred zhang in size. It instantly fell to the ground. Then a blade light flashed past Gu Qian's body. You dare. Seeing Jiang Xiu's blade light, Gu Diqian immediately woke up. He soared into the sky to save his son. However, when the sharp blade light passed through Gu Qian's body, the palace behind him had already collapsed. It turned into endless dust and rolled in the wind. Everything was too late. Pooh. Gu Qian retched. Blood flowed out of his mouth. He continuously retreated a few steps. The long sword in his hand fell to the ground. His eyes instantly lost their color. One blade and his immortal body was destroyed. I told you to wash your neck and wait for death. Whoosh. Another blade light ruthlessly chopped over. Even though he was already dead, Jiang Xiu's blade still chopped his head off. Son. Junior brother. On the stage, Ji Daozong was stunned. Jiang Xiu actually killed Gu Qian. Chapter 541. Gu Qian's head fell to the ground, but his eyes were still staring. He still couldn't believe that he would die in the hands of Jiang Xiu. Not only him, but everyone present couldn't believe that Jiang Xiu would really kill Gu Diqian's son. This was the son of an elder. Son. It would take a lot of effort for an immortal to give birth to a son. At a glance, there were so many elders, but only Gu Diqian had a son. The others were either adopted sons or disciples. Give me back my son's life. Gu Diqian roared crazily, as angry as a lion. Seeing Gu Diqian rushing over, Jiang Xiu didn't show any fear. He didn't move at all, as if this terrifying immortal king who had lost his son wasn't coming for him. He looked at him with a cold smile. Impudent. Suddenly, an angry roar resounded. The law enforcement elder sitting on the law enforcement platform stood up, turned into a light, and rushed over. He blocked in front of Jiang Xiu and suddenly blasted out a palm. When two immortal kings attacked, it attracted the power of an immortal king. It was a terrifying existence. Even humans could build an atomic bomb, let alone these two. The power of this palm strike could be imagined. Boom boom boom. Under the deliberate control of the law enforcement elder, the terrifying power rushed up to the sky. It was definitely more terrifying than an atomic bomb explosion. A hole seemed to have been blasted open in the sky. The mountain under his feet shook violently. The sky collapsed and the earth sank. Gu Diqian was shaken back a few steps. He stared angrily at the law enforcement elder, but the law enforcement elder didn't move at all. This was the head of the law enforcement hall, one of the top 13 immortal kings. Gu Diqian, life and death in the true disciples' battle is up to fate. You, an elder, actually took revenge? Don't you have any shame? Gu Diqian's breathing quickened. He clenched his fists and trembled with anger, but he slowly calmed down. The law enforcement hall's law was like a mountain. The head of the law enforcement hall would never allow anyone to violate the sex law. Okay, the elder of law enforcement said. It's good that you know. Go back to your seat. Not only were there people from Tianqing school, there was also a person from Taihua sect sitting here. Gu Diqian suppressed his murderous intent, bowed to the law enforcement elder, and retreated. As for his disciples, they collected Gu Qian's corpse. Let's go. His son had been killed. How could he stay here any longer? He angrily led his disciples away. He would not let this matter rest. Let's continue, Elder of Law Enforcement said before returning to his seat. Jiang Xiu looked at the elder presiding over the true inheritance battle and said, "Now you shouldn't be mistaken about who wins and who loses, right? Jiang Xiu wins this round." Hua, the crowd was in an uproar. This battle was truly too shocking, and it was truly filled with ups and downs. The outcome was even more unexpected. Gu Qian had utilized the Blood-Soul Separation Sword, and even activated the restrictions on the ancient immortal sword, yet he still lost. Jiang Xiu had even charged through 3 minor realms and a major realm in succession before killing his opponent. A miracle, an absolute miracle. Whether it was surviving a soul attack or charging through 3 minor realms and a major realm in succession, it was unimaginable and completely impossible. Today, 2 things had happened to Jiang Xiu at the same time. It was truly unbelievable. Not to mention the ordinary disciples, even the elders and Ji Daozong on the throne could not figure it out. In fact, if Jiang Xiu's realm was still a demigod, there was a possibility that he could improve very quickly. That was, he did not have a godhead yet. If he refined someone else's godhead, there would be a skyrocketing increase. However, Jiang Xiu was already a heavenly god with a god relic and godhead. No matter how unbelievable it was, the eyes could not deceive people. The Jiang Xiu in front of them was a genuine upper-rank heavenly god. The way the crowd looked at Jiang Xiu changed again. It had only been 4 months since he entered the Tianqing school, and he had risen from a lower-rank heavenly god to an upper-rank heavenly god. The speed at which he leveled up was flying. From the sect leader to the true disciples of the Tianqing school, every one of them was a top genius. However, at this moment, they could not help but doubt their lives. Who am I? Where am I? What am I going to do? They really felt that thousands of years of hard work had gone to waste. Not only were the people of the Tianqing school shocked, but Jiang Yan, the elder of the Taihua sect, was also extremely shocked. Such talent was simply unheard of. Perhaps there was a coincidence that was hard to understand, but Jiang Xiu's performance before this was already quite extraordinary. Now it was even more extraordinary that it made people's hair stand on end. On the other hand, Little Witch's beautiful eyes lit up when she saw this. She felt that she was going to be rich. As the woman of such a genius, there was a great chance that she would become a woman with real power like her grandaunt in the future. Next round, Little Witch gently gave Madame Ji a look. Madame Ji understood and said, "Wait. Jiang Xiu, you stay here first." Everyone looked at Madame Ji. "Jiang Xiu, I heard that you are not married yet. I have discussed with the sect leader. I have a descendant that I want to betroth to you as your Taoist companion." Wow. Once again, there was an uproar in the field. Many people were envious. First, his strength had soared and he was in the limelight. Now the sect leader's wife was going to betroth him to her descendant. Then from now on, she would be a family with the sect leader. TSK, this was the pinnacle of life. The expressions of the sharp-witted elders, including the law-enforcing elder, changed. Jiang Xiu's sudden appearance gave them hope that the Tianqing school would once again shock the Immortal Martial Arts Academy. However, if he married a female disciple of the Taihua sect, then, the most outstanding geniuses of the Tianqing school, from the sect leader to the sect leader, would be bound to the Taihua sect and forever be its vassal. A few elders almost couldn't help but stand up to oppose. But was there any use in doing so? In the end, they would only be asking for a rebuff. Who? Jiang Xiu's words were cold. Madame Ji didn't care much. She saw that Jiang Xiu had been like this since the beginning. She smiled and said, "It's the girl beside me, Jiang Xiaoyao." Jiang Xiaoyao pretended to be shy and lowered her head. Ji Daozong and Jiang Yan both had relaxed smiles on their faces. There was no need to introduce who Jiang Xiaoyao was, and what her relationship with them was. Ji Daozong didn't even say a word when she forced a Tianqing school disciple to death on the spot. Clearly, this girl was also very favored in the Taihua sect. Xiaoyao is very outstanding. Although she's not as talented as you, the Taihua sect has put in a lot of effort to cultivate her. She's definitely worthy of you. You don't have to worry about the Taihua sect's dowry. They'll definitely prepare a top-notch god cultivation method for you. Jiang Xiu was only a god cultivation method, but he had entered the gate of immortality. Naturally, he was lacking in cultivation methods. Madame Ji was like a snake pinching its weak spot. However, she didn't know that Jiang Xiu was holding the investiture god scroll, the source of the god cultivation method, which was ranked 11th on the jade butterfly of good fortune. Now, as long as Jiang Xiu nodded, he would immediately become the son-in-law of the Taihua sect. Being the sect leader's junior was 100 times more valuable. He even got a beauty for free. Anyone would be overjoyed at such a wonderful thing. Jiang Xiu's cold eyes swept over Xiaoyao Jiang. He had to admit that Xiaoyao Jiang's beauty was at the level of causing the downfall of a country. However, Jiang Xiu's mind flashed with the scene of the guardian disciple pulling out his sword and cutting his own throat. He said, "You're too ugly. Not interested." The scene quieted down. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. What? Xiaoyao Jiang's bashful face was filled with anger. She stood up abruptly. Jiang Xiu said, "There's a second time for me. You're too ugly. I'm not interested." You, Madame Ji and the others didn't think that Jiang Xiu would reject her. In their eyes, this was a chance for him to leap over the dragon's gate. He would instantly go from a commoner to a noble young master. Don't be impatient. Madame Ji comforted Xiaoyao Jiang. She looked at Jiang Xiu and said, "Are you joking? Xiaoyao's beauty is on Qingzhou's 100-flower list. It's not an exaggeration to say that she's devastatingly beautiful." Jiang Xiu said, "But I think she's ugly. What can I do?" You. Xiaoyao Jiang was about to go crazy. Madame Ji and Jiang Yan's faces were also very ugly. They were actually rejected in public and were even ridiculed as ugly. However, this wasn't an ordinary marriage. Jiang Xiu had to agree even if he didn't want to. Ji Daozong's face turned cold. "Madame's words are my words. Jiang Xiu, this marriage is decided." Chapter 542. It was originally a matter of mutual consent, but since the sect leader had spoken, it was an order. Xiaoya's face turned ashen. He didn't believe that Ji Daozong couldn't see through Taihua sect's intentions. Jiang Xiu could refuse such a temptation, but as the sect leader he wanted to go further and further down this path of no return. What was the point of going to the Tianqing school? It wasn't just Xiaoya. Lu Chongkong and the disciplinary elder all had ugly expressions. They were furious, but they couldn't do anything about it. The disciples present also felt that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Why would the sect leader order something like this? Jiang Xiu looked at Ji Daozong and slowly said, "Are you ordering me?" Ji Daozong said, "Yes, this is my order." If it was just persuasion, Jiang Xiu would have already refused. Madame Ji had refused and Ji Daozong's persuasion would have been rejected as well. He could only give orders as the sect leader. Jiang Xiu said, "The marriage of sect disciples has always been decided by the sect leader. The more open-minded ones would even let their disciples make the decision. They've never listened to the sect leader's orders." Could it be that this is a sect mission? Ji Daozong's expression gradually changed. Jiang Xiu's words hit the nail on the head. Madame Ji and Jiang Yan from Taihua sect also changed their expressions. It wasn't easy to reply. If they admitted it, then the marriage between Jiang Xiu and Taihua sect would be a sect mission. Then the nature of the mission would change. If there was a mission, there would be a purpose. What purpose? If they didn't admit it, then it wouldn't be a mission. If it wasn't a mission, then why would the sect leader give such an order? This brat is quite cunning. The elders on the side were secretly happy. Not only was Jiang Xiu talented, but he was also very smart. He was truly a rare talent. Ji Daozong's expression became gloomy. Your talent isn't bad, but there aren't many god cultivators in the Tianqing school. Madame Ji also said that she would definitely prepare a top god cultivation technique for you as a dowry. Whether it's for you or for the sect, you have no reason to refuse this. These words were spoken from the point of view of the greater good, very much in line with the words of the sect master. But Jiang Xiu said coldly, "I don't need it." Ji Daozong's expression stiffened. He had spoken nicely, but he didn't know what was good for him. His tone became sharp. For the sake of the sect, if I say you need it, then you need it. No one dared to make a sound. The sect master's anger was already burning. But Jiang Xiu said, "You're not me, how would you know?" Whoosh. Causing trouble. This is the sentence that Lord Sect Master wanted you to forcefully accept, yet you still took it seriously. Impudent. An elder of the Ji Dao sect angrily slapped the table and stood up. Jiang Xiu, how dare you speak to the sect master in such a tone? He rebuked. Jiang Xiu smiled faintly. I'm just being straightforward. Am I wrong? The sect master is neither a god cultivator nor me. How would he know if I need it? The elders and the disciples all snickered underground. Of course. In the past, the Ji Dao sect was also domineering, but no one dared to contradict him. Today, Jiang Xiu was holding on to reason. In the past, Jiang Luoxia definitely wouldn't have dared to contradict him like this. This was because the domineering sect master was a living tyrant. If anyone dared to say no to him, he would directly cut them down with his sword, no matter who they were. But the Ji Dao sect couldn't be so domineering. He already had a guilty conscience, and he was far from being able to compare to Jiang Luoxia. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lost to Jiang Luoxia back then. Brother-in-law, are all the disciples of your noble sect so unruly? Jiang Xiu said, being unruly is better than being a toad wanting to eat swan meat. The little demon was about to explode when she heard this. She angrily pointed at Jiang Xiu. You dare call this fairy a toad? Jiang Xiu said. Could it be that you're not? You're worthy of me. I only spent a trifling 4 months to go from lower sky god to upper sky god. In the Xianwu continent, you won't be able to find a second person like me in 10,000 years. There's trash like you all over the Xianwu continent. You want to be my wife? If you're not a toad, then what are you? The little demon was so angry that she almost vomited blood. The disciples below roared with laughter. Yesterday, this woman had forced a guardian disciple to die, offending the entire Tianxing school. Now that she was publicly humiliated by Jiang Xiu, they let out a long sigh of relief. Grandaunt, when had the little demon ever been humiliated like this? When had he ever been teased like this? His eyes were brimming with tears and he was about to cry. Madame Ji's expression was also very ugly. The little demon was part of her family. If her family was humiliated, it was like slapping her in the face. Ji Dao sect coldly snorted. Only then did the laughter die down. Now, Jiang Xiu was publicly saying that the little demon wasn't worthy of him. It was just that there was no other way to talk about it. Ji Dao sect said, Jiang Xiu, your talent is not bad, but if it weren't for your talent, do you think you'd be worthy of a female disciple of the Taihua sect? Worthy of a junior of our sect? Jiang Xiu didn't want to talk about this with him. He said, so you're not willing, and I'm not willing. Let's just forget about this matter. Full of tricks. How could someone like Ji Dao sect, who had a pure heart and few desires, be a match for someone who had survived the explosion of information and hundreds of millions of netizens? At this point, Jiang Xiu had almost made him collapse. Unless Ji Dao sect gave the order as the sect master. At this time, since I'm intervening, then I must succeed. Jiang Xiu, are you forcing me to give you an order? But Ji Dao sect was definitely not an ordinary person to be able to become the sect master. His words made him sound like he was abusing his power for personal gain. I'm not giving the order for the sect's mission, but for personal reasons. Jiang Xiu's expression turned cold. Will the sect master give the order? Ji Dao sect's anger rose. He pointed at Jiang Xiaoyao and said, I order you to marry her. For a moment, the scene was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. In the end, he still shamelessly used his power as the sect master. Xiaoyao fiercely raised her chin. So what if you're arrogant? You still have to obey. Madame Ji and Jiang Yan's faces revealed a trace of mockery. In front of two powerful sects, Jiang Xiu had to obey even if he didn't want to. You only have potential now, but you haven't grown. Jiang Xiu, what do you have to be proud of? I'm marrying you because you've cultivated for 8 lifetimes. Don't be ungrateful. You've offended Gu Deqian. If you don't marry me, I'll get someone to kill you. When that time comes, you won't even know where to cry. You have to thank this fairy for saving your life. Jiang Xiu coldly said, "Forgive me for not being able to comply." Wow. Everyone present was stunned. Xiao Yao, Madame Ji Jiang Yan, and the others all widened their eyes. What? Ji Dao sect also wondered if he had heard wrongly. His eyes emitted a terrifying light. What did you say? Say it again. I won't marry this woman. You dare to disobey the sect master's order. Jiang Xiu said. As a disciple of the Sky Motion sect, I'll do my best for anything that benefits the Sky Motion sect. However, for me to marry a female disciple of the Tai Hua sect for no reason, I'm afraid I can't comply. Do you know what the punishment is for disobeying the sect master's order? Jiang Xiu said. Of course I know. It's a capital offense. Are you not afraid of death? Jiang Xiu said. With my talent, my future is bright. Who wants to die? If you don't want me to marry this ugly woman, I, Jiang Xiu, would rather die than comply. The muscles on Ji Dao Sec's face fiercely twitched, and then his eyes twitched violently. Do you think I don't dare to kill you? Jiang Xiu looked at him arrogantly. Men, drag him away and behead him. Ji Dao Sect shouted angrily. With Jiang Xiu's talent, if they were in the same boat, he would even consider taking him as a disciple. However, this child was so arrogant and unruly that he would only be a disaster if he was left alive. Sect Master. Sect Master. Many elders stood up. Jiang Xiu's talent was very rare. He was a treasure of Tianqing School's future. Killing him would be a great loss to Tianqing School. No one is asking for a marriage. I have made up my mind. Jiang Xiu, there are two paths in front of you. Either you marry Xiao Yao or you die. Jiang Xiu still said. I'd rather die than comply. Drag him away and behead him. Ji Dao Sect almost roared out these words. Everyone's expression changed. Ji Daozong had unexpectedly persecuted the geniuses of his own sect for the sake of an outer sect. Xiaoye quickly arrived next to Ji Daozong and said in a low voice, I went to check Guozhang's grave. There was no corpse inside. Ji Dao Sec's eyes suddenly widened. Chapter 543. When Ji Daozong's eyes widened, he looked abnormally terrifying, as if he wanted to eat someone. He looked back at Xiaoye in disbelief. Are you serious? Xiaoye nodded, a worried expression on his face. Sometimes, the reason why a thief was caught was not because his skills were not good enough, but more because he had a guilty conscience. Ji Daozong's loss of composure at this moment was because he had a guilty conscience. No, that's impossible. I saw it with my own eyes. Xiaoye said, in this world anything can be fake. What you see might not be real, but the tomb is really empty. Ji Daozong said, what do you mean by telling me this now? You want to say that this matter is related to him. He was obviously referring to Jiang Xiu. Xiaoye did not speak. Anything he said now would be superfluous. Sometimes, especially for someone with a guilty conscience, the more one did not speak to them, the more chaotic they would be. Those with poor mental fortitude would not be able to withstand the psychological pressure, and would directly have a nervous breakdown. Absolutely impossible. If it was him, how could he be so stupid as to expose himself? He would be even more high profile. This was also where Jiang Xiu's brilliance lay. Xiaoye said, it's not that there are no corpses. I'm afraid this will be a big problem. If someone wants to make a fuss about this, I'm afraid. Until now, 60 years had not even passed. Ji Daozong felt a bone-piercing chill. Jiang Luoxia had left a huge shadow in his heart. Although Ji Daozong did not admit it, he was very clear in his heart that he was very afraid of Jiang Luoxia. It could even be said that his expression would change when he talked about him, whether it was when he was alive or after he died. It's impossible for him to still be alive. Someone must be messing around. Who is it? Ji Daozong's face was a bit pale. His gaze swept through the crowd of elders. If there really was someone who wanted to rebel against him, then it must be among this group of people. Every one of them was suspicious, but none of them seemed suspicious. Suddenly, Ji Daozong suddenly turned his head to look at Madame Ji. Even the Dao companion beside him was very suspicious. The reason why Ji Daozong could sit on the throne of the Tianqing school was because he had relatives and Taihua sect as his backing. However, as time passed, his position as the sect head became more and more stable. It was hard to guarantee that Taihua sect would not be afraid that he would grow wings and fly. Daozong, what's wrong? You don't look good. Ji Daozong's gaze flickered like a venomous snake, both fearful and ferocious. Is it because I overdid it? Madam Ji said. How could it be possible to break through to the Immortal King realm? The Immortal Emperor realm is a legendary existence. Ji's Taihua sect. Of course, Taihua sect. At this time, Jiang Xiu had already been pushed to the punishment platform. The law enforcement disciple did not use force. In fact, he still admired Jiang Xiu in his heart. It could be said that Jiang Xiu was really unyielding. Junior brother, I'm sorry. Actually, Sai. He wanted to persuade Jiang Xiu that there was no need to be so stubborn. The most important thing was to stay alive. A smile hung on Jiang Xiu's face. He won't kill me. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. The law enforcement disciples really didn't want Jiang Xiu to die, but the sect leader had already given the order. Your only chance now is to change your mind and marry a female disciple from the Taihua sect. Jiang Xiu shook his head and said, he doesn't dare. If he persists in going about things the wrong way, the law enforcement hall will definitely use the 6 weapons disintegration technique. 6 weapons disintegration technique? The law enforcement disciple smiled and said, Junior Marshal Brother Jiang, you're too confident. You don't think so? Jiang Xiu was very confident. There were so many elders present in the law enforcement hall. Which one of them wasn't hot-blooded? The Ji Dao sect's relatives could see that Jiang Xiu's control over the Sky Motion sect was far from being comparable to Jiang Xiu in the past. The law enforcement hall and elders wouldn't let the Ji Daozong act recklessly. They definitely wouldn't let the Ji Daozong kill such an outstanding disciple for a ridiculous reason. He had this confidence. Jiang Xiu simply closed his eyes and checked the situation in his body. He had completely absorbed the karmic fire, and his heavenly fire law had reached an extremely high level. However, it was still far from the heavenly fire law perfection, especially when it was harder to comprehend in the later stages. However, Jiang Xiu really didn't have a soul. He didn't know how big of an impact this would have. His divine Tao of destiny divine light had become much more powerful, but the lesser destiny technique was far too intangible. In fact, he had a feeling that this ability wasn't something that could be controlled by an individual. Instead, it was something that could be triggered by a certain type of opportunity. He couldn't even remember how he had triggered the lesser destiny technique. If the Ji Daozong really wanted to kill him later, he had to activate the lesser destiny technique again to avoid this calamity. However, from the perspective of the balance of power, whether the lesser destiny technique would work or not should be related to the target. The possibility of an immortal king like the Ji Daozong was definitely much more difficult than an ant like Gu Qian. They're here. The people from the law enforcement hall came to announce the decree. Jiang Shidi, get up quickly. However, Jiang Xiu still didn't move. The people from the law enforcement hall let him be and directly announced, pass down the decree of the elders of the law enforcement hall to temporarily imprison Jiang Xiu and await his punishment in the future. Haha. Jiang Xiu chuckled and slowly opened his eyes. He glanced sideways at the senior brother who was escorting him. The senior brother was stunned. The sect master really didn't dare to kill Jiang Xiu. Many people objected to this matter. In fact, the most important point was that the Ji Daozong himself realized that he shouldn't kill Jiang Xiu. In fact, he couldn't kill Jiang Xiu openly. If he stubbornly insisted on doing so, it would only cause public anger. Jiang Xiu was different from the disciples who had died in the Guardian Hall. He was a top-notch genius who had become an upper heavenly god in 4 months. The law enforcement hall saw hope in him for the Tianqing school to rise again. Come, take him to the law enforcement hall. After today, there were many people who wanted Jiang Xiu to live. Many of them were elders who were loyal to the Tianqing school. There were also many people who wanted Jiang Xiu to die. The sect master, the Taihua Jiang family, and of course, Gu Diqian's faction. Jiang Xiu could be said to be standing at the mouth of a volcano. He sincerely said, "Prison is still the safest." Jiang Xiu had been in the law enforcement hall's prison many times before. In his previous life, Jiang Xiu was a frequent guest here. It was a pity that there was nothing hidden in this place. There are no 3 meals a day here. If there is a need, I can inform your servant, the senior brother in the prison said. Okay. The people in the prison had also changed. After all, so many years had passed. It was normal for there to be a change. Senior brother, can you tell my servant to go to the city to exchange for some poison testing powder? The senior brother was amused when he heard this. Are you afraid that someone will poison you? Jiang Xiu said. It's better to be safe than sorry. He couldn't help but think of what happened on Earth. Didn't Cheng Lingran poison him? The reason why she didn't poison Jiang Xiu to death was because she underestimated Jiang Xiu. However, the people here wouldn't do that. Excuse me. The senior brother nodded and said, okay. If something really happened to him in the prison, as the person in charge, he would be severely punished. Actually, if you are so worried, you can take a fasting pill. Immortal cultivators who weren't greedy for food all took fasting pills. A meal would take more than 10 minutes. After accumulating, the time would be endless. However, Jiang Xiu was a layman. He couldn't stand not eating. Besides, it wasn't Jiang Xiu's style to be afraid of death and not eat. After dusk, a beautiful young girl appeared in the prison. She was dressed in white and her long skirt dragged on the ground. Jiang Xiu closed his eyes. He raised his head slightly and said coldly, "Do you think you are fine?" Jiang Xiu didn't need to open his eyes to guess who had come. Whoever was the most unwilling would be the first to come. Even if you don't die, you will be in prison for the rest of your life. Without resources and cultivation conditions, you won't be able to obtain more powerful secret techniques. Even if you are a genius, it will be difficult for you to improve. Do you see the people of the dynasty? You think they are inferior because they are not talented. No, it is because they don't have resources and don't have immortal martial arts. Think about it carefully. Your future will be like theirs. In the end, you will die of old age here. If you beg me, maybe, you will see the light of day again. That you're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.